Spec one. Oh.
Mr. Chairman, we're going to be live on YouTube now.
We are live, is that correct? All right, folks, since we presumably are.
The video is not enabled in the chambers.
Go ahead.
We're good. We're live.
Okay. All right, folks, today is Wednesday, September 15th. It is now 6:09 p.m. And this is the Historic Resources Preservation Board regular meeting. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Judith Fox. Judy, I know you're there. I see you. Okay. Bernard Guthrie.
Bernard is here.
Bernard is here. Bill
Good.
Feldkamp.
Here.
Ricky Martin.
Here.
Steve Pickett.
Here.
Jeff Harris.
Here.
Bob Dorenzo is absent. That's it. You have a quorum.
Wonderful. Those of you who are here, please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Staff, are there any additions or deletions or changes?
Sorry. Mr. Chairman, we do have one additional item. I don't know if we made it on the agenda. It's going to be under planning issues. You're going to have a conceptual review tonight. It is 320 North Lakeside Drive. The project you saw last week. They did make some modifications and they would like your feedback tonight. Other than that, nothing.
Okay, that's under planning issues, 320 Lakeside for an informal discussion.
Yes, sir.
Minutes have been approved.
there are no minutes for this meeting yet. For last meetings.
Yes, we need a motion to approve.
No, we don't have any yet. so
Oh, we don't have any, okay.
Yet.
Nothing to approve. Then could you take care of swearing in staff and
Certainly. Give us a moment till we get everybody moved over.
We're going to move you over from attendee. If you're going to provide testimony this evening on an application, please turn on your video and turn on your audio. So we're having issues, it looks like, with Ann Fairfax and Porter Smythe and Ampere Lawrence. If you all could please rejoin the meeting. We're having difficulty promoting you to panelists. If you don't get sworn in, you'll get sworn in right before your item. Nope, it seemed to work. Okay.
Mr. Lubin, if you'd like to unmute yourself, and Mr. Anderson.
And Ms. Fairfax. Mr. Smythe, if you could both turn on your video and your audio.
And Bo Allen, if you'd like to unmute, give testimony. Mr. Scher, everybody that's giving testimony, please unmute.
And turn on your video.
Turn on your video.
turn this on?
Yes.
Mr. Lubin, can you, there you go, got it. Okay, we're ready. Everybody as you are. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Raise your right hand, Mr. Smythe, and please say yes, that you're attesting that you're going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. May not hear.
Okay.
Swear again
Later. Okay.
Okay, all right.
All right, let's continue. Those who have not been sworn, we will swear in when their cases come about. Are there any board disclosures for this evening?
None from no.
Ms. Fox or Mr. Guthrie?
I have none.
Okay, she has none. Then let's get right into new business. 220 South L Street is the first project.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll be giving that tonight.
Aaron, can you please enable me to screen share?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
And Abe, I'll just say next slide when I need you to turn. But again, for the record, this is Jordan Hodges, Senior Preservation Coordinator for the City of Lake Worth Beach. This item is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new roughly 540 square foot accessory dwelling unit located at 220 South L Street. Next slide. So the property is a 50 by 135 parcel containing two 25-foot wide platted lots of record located on the east side of South L Street between 2nd Avenue South and 3rd Avenue South. The property is a single family residence in the multifamily residential zoning district. Next slide. So here you can see a survey of the parcel. Again, it is two unified 25-foot wide platted lots of record. You can see a single family residence at the front of the parcel on lot 7, as well as a rear detached garage that was built at a little bit of an angle. Next slide. So the two buildings on the site were both constructed around 1924, both frame vernacular buildings utilizing wood siding, gable roofs, and wood windows. You can see their footprints depicted here on the property card from the 1940s. Next slide. But on March 3rd, 2021, the city's building official, Peter Ringel, declared that the garage was unsafe due to decay and deterioration and was likely to collapse. And the demolition of the structure was approved with building permit 21-20-253. Next slide. So here's a photo of the front structure again from the 1920s frame vernacular in very good condition and in a nice representation of the style. Next slide. This is another shot from South L Street. You can see how the structure is sited on the south parcel with an open lawn to the north. Next slide. And here's an aerial shot again showing the configuration of the lot, but again, that rear detached garage is no longer standing. Next slide. So the applicant is proposing a new 540 square foot accessory dwelling unit that's roughly in the same location as the old garage. The proposed ADU is consistent with all site data requirements in the zoning code, and it meets the minimum off-street parking requirement and complies with all impermeable surface requirements, building coverage allotments, and required setbacks. You can see the existing structure on the plan. That rectangular feature north of the residence is a bocce court, and then the rear L-shaped ADU to the rear also provided are 3 parking spaces off the alley. There's a tandem perpendicular spot running south of the ADU, and then a parallel spot running parallel to the alley. Next slide. Here you can see the interior layout. Again, it is an L-shaped plan. On the west wing, you have a living and dining area, and then a kitchen in that corner, along with a bathroom, and then a master bedroom to the north, And then you have a large covered porch in the interior angle. The project architect also included a window and door schedule. So it's a combination of single hung glass and casement windows, and then some full view glazed entry doors, and then storage doors. Those storage doors are for storage that's accessed from the interior there on the north end. So a storage closet. Next slide. The design of the ADU is largely inspired by the garage structure that was demolished. The project architect developed a linear plan closely sited in the location as the garage, and added a cross gable massing and a covered porch to kind of mimic additions that would take place to a structure over time. The exterior finishes include dimensional asphalt shingles, cementitious lap siding, and cementitious trim sill detailing. And again, the fenestration consists of French doors, wood or wood look slat doors, and single hung encasement windows. Next slide. So here you can see the detailed cardinal elevations. You can see in the top left, the ADU is smaller and subordinate to the primary building. Again, ADUs are limited to 60% of the square footage of the primary structure per the zoning code. But the design features compatibly sized windows, lap siding with a cross gable configuration, and appropriate trim and sills. Next slide. So the Historic Preservation Ordinance lays out the visual compatibility criteria, and that was analyzed on pages 5 through 9 of your staff report. It is staff's analysis that the project is a compatible addition to the Southeast Lucerne Local Historic District. Importantly, the ADU is not the primary structure on the parcel, and it is constructed in a secondary and subordinate manner with compatible architectural detailing and siding on the parcel. Next slide. The proposal is largely compatible with the wood frame vernacular architectural style as defined in the guidelines. The structure is designed utilizing elements that were commonly found on 20th century residential structures throughout the city. And the drawings result in a compatible design for the district. Staff is recommending several standard conditions of approval to further visual compatibility. Next slide. But as proposed and as conditioned, it is consistent with the land development regulations. The structure's design is generally consistent with the Historic Preservation Design Guidelines, and staff is recommending approval. We can go through the conditions now. I believe the property owner and the property owner's architect are here with us this evening. So however you'd like to proceed, Mr. Board Chair.
Let's hear from the architect and or the applicant.
Jeffrey Harris, Jeffrey B. Harris, architect. This is a fairly straightforward project. Oh, obviously, I'm a board member, so I will be voting on the conditions on this under 3. This is a fairly straightforward project, but it's a nice little building, I think. And the project itself, I believe, is a really good addition to the neighborhood. One of the nicest things about the original garage that was unfortunately torn down because it just was dilapidated was the proportion running east-west as you entered the building. It was very narrow and very tall, and with a completely exposed ceiling. So it had a really beautiful sense of proportion. The owners and I were both interested in trying to maintain that proportion, as well as the western elevation, which had a pair of French doors in it at one point, or had a pair of doors in it. So at any rate, those really reflect, that portion of the addition really reflects the actual proportions of the old garage. Then coming off at a right angle to that, facing north, is the bedroom wing, the private wing of the addition. And that is essentially the same type of a proportion. It's a little bit wider and a little bit narrow, and a little bit lower, but in general, it matches the proportion of that. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them. That's really pretty much the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Board members, do you have questions for the architect?
When it's an accessory unit, is it separate electric? Is it
Yeah, it has its own meter.
its own meter? Okay,
Yeah, it'll have a separate source.
It doesn't have to be.
it doesn't.
It's not a requirement for the city.
Okay. Mr. Pickett? Nothing? How about Judy Fox? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Is this a multifamily here? I missed the zoning.
I'm pretty sure it is multi-family.
Yeah.
Yes, the zoning district is low density multifamily MF20.
Okay, thank you.
And let's see, who else is out there? Mr. Guthrie, of course.
Looks like a big improvement over what was there before. Project looks good. I don't have any issues. The storage, there's a what it looks to be a lean-to on the back side, and that is only in the presentation said something about it's only accessible from the interior.
No, that was incorrect. It's actually only accessible from the exterior. It's just
From the exterior.
Yeah, it's
one of
just gardening supplies and bocce balls and things like that.
There's a large L-shaped portion. It looks like it's accessible only from the inside on the floor plan.
That's right, but that's the bedroom wing. If you look at the floor plan again, you see the storage shed is at the north end of that wing. And you can see in the elevations, the doors on the north end. It's just a low slope shed. It actually recalls exactly what the old house or the old building used to have. It had a little shed just like that.
Okay. Other than I think it looks good. It's going to be an improvement for the property, and I do understand it's a multifamily, so ADUs are allowed, and so obviously this is going to fit right into the neighborhood.
How is the parking situation?
We have 3 spaces off the alley.
2 are tandem and 1 is parallel to the alley.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's enough for 2 separate homes, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah. All right, I have just a few comments confirming that it is CBS construction with
No, this is going to be wood frame construction.
wood frame, but then instead of clapboard, it is a
It'll be
cementitious thing
it'll be
on
some-
plywood or something.
But just built conventionally as a conventional frame structure.
Okay, and you have a shallow slope there on the porch. That's going to be metal or
That'll be a liquid membrane.
liquid membrane.
Yeah.
Okay, and then I think you answered my question whether that the doors at the end of the living room were actually the old original garage. They are not. They are designed to look like the original garage with the French doors.
Well,
Are you reusing what was that?
no, but are you talking about in the addition, the French doors? Facing that, they'll be facing the house.
Mhm.
Face those French doors recall the original elevation of the building.
Okay. Well, other than that, I agree with everyone else. It's certainly a nice improvement to the neighborhood, and perhaps someone will give us a motion.
I'll move to approve it. I move to approve Hrpb project number 21-001-00216 with staff recommended conditions for certificate of appropriateness for the new construction of a plus or minus 440 square foot accessory dwelling unit located at 2020 South L Street, based upon the competent substantial evidence in the staff report and pursuant to the City of Lake Worth Beach land development regulations and historic preservation requirements.
Second.
Seconded by whom?
I'll second.
Okay, that's seconded by Ms. Fox. Okay. And I want to make sure that we know it's a 540-foot addition at 220 South L Street. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Hearing no more discussion. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Our next project is 1029 North Palm Way, an appeal of a development review. And perhaps our attorney can review with us what we're allowed to consider as part of this as board members.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, the appeal pursuant to section 23-17A of the LDRs is an appeal on the record. And that's the record as it was before the administrative body that made the initial decision. So the appeal shall be heard at a quasi judicial hearing. So we'll conduct a quasi judicial hearing, and the decision must be based on the record made in the proceeding below. So in the course of the hearing, you can hear presentations from the appellant, from the staff, and you can allow public comment, but to the extent that anyone introduces new factual evidence that wasn't part of the record below, that should not be considered in making the decision.
Okay, thank you very much. Is someone on staff able to present this project?
Yes, Mr. Fogel will be presenting tonight.
Right. So good evening. I'm Abraham Fogel, Preservation Planner for the City of Lake Worth Beach, and I will be presenting item B, which is Hrpb project number 21-124-00003, which is an appeal of the Development Review Official's decision regarding the expansion of a legal non-conforming garage apartment at 1029 North Palmway. So the applicant, Jeffrey Harris, on behalf of the owner, Ryan Shear, is appealing again the decision of the Development Review Official, denying the request to expand the plus or minus 300 square foot non-conforming garage apartment into the plus or minus 240 square foot garage stall. The subject property is a 50 by 135 platted lot of record located on the southwest corner of North Palmway and 11th Avenue North in Lake Worth Beach. And the property is located within the single-family residential zoning district and retains a future land use of single-family residential. I apologize. So our city attorney already discussed this a little bit, but just a quick recap in terms of the Hrpb authority. In this manner, an applicant may appeal a final decision of the Development Review Official to the Historic Resources Preservation Board within 30 days of the official's written decision. We will cover the dates, but everything was filed within that time frame, and that's why we're here today for the appeal. So going back a little bit on the development history of this property, the single-family structure fronting North Palmway was constructed circa 1940 in a masonry vernacular architectural style. Coral Gables architect H. George Fink designed the structure at a cost of $4,500. The garage apartment fronting 11th Avenue North was constructed circa 1949, also in a masonry vernacular architectural style. The architectural drawings, as shown on the right side of the slide, illustrate a single-story garage apartment with a smooth stucco exterior finish, hip roof, and casement windows. And if we hone into this image a little bit, we can see that fronting North Palmway, we have the residence, and to the back, the garage apartment that was constructed in 1949. We look closely to the floor plan, we can see that it essentially consisted of an apartment, a garage stall, and laundry facilities at the back of the garage. So as seen in the architectural plans, we have two residential units on the property, the single-family home and the garage apartment. The property is located in the single-family residential zoning district, which allows the maximum density of 1 unit on a property. So we have a non-conforming use here because we have 2 units, whereas 1 would be the maximum. Here are some current photos as it sits today. You can see from the outside that some exterior alterations were performed without approvals. You can kind of see the outline of where the garage door used to be located, and there was also a driveway prior. So a little bit on the timeline of this project. In May of 2021, a code compliance case was established based on a citizen complaint. The property was cited for the conversion of the garage stall and the detached rear building into additional living space. This also, again, included those exterior alterations I mentioned. In May On May 6th, we have that change in ownership to Brian Shear, which is the current owner. And staff began corresponding with the owner and the applicant starting on June 10. We received an inquiry regarding this expansion into the garage stall, and we indicated that the city's land development regulations did not allow this. And should the applicant seek to appeal this, one of the options available was to submit a zoning verification. Zoning verification is a service we offer where you can ask staff a zoning question, provide an application and a fee, and you can receive a determination. So that was one way to, should the applicant be interested in an appeal. We had further communications on June 29th regarding different options. And then we further clarified that one option was to submit the zoning verification, or a COA for the proposed changes could be submitted, which the applicant would also have the opportunity to appeal to the Hrpb. So on July 9th, the COA was submitted. And on July 22nd, the DRO's determination was issued indicating the proposal was in violation of the city's code as it pertains to non-conforming uses. After that, we received a notice of appeal on the basis of appeal on August 4th, and the item was scheduled for the next available hearing. So honing into the two main items in our timeline, on July 9th, we received that proposal to expand into the garage stall. And again, this is to retroactively approve since this work was already completed. And I've outlined that space in red. That's where the garage stall used to be. And to the right of our slide, we have the zoning determination that indicates the code section that this proposal is in violation of. And that's what we'll cover in the next slides. So LDR section 23.5-3 relates to nonconformities. The purpose of this section is to allow for the continuation of nonconformities which were lawfully permitted or established prior to the current LDRs. This section covers nonconforming uses of land, nonconforming lots of record, and nonconforming buildings and structures, and provides for their continued existence based on their legal nonconforming status, but discourages or disallows the expansion or enlargement of such nonconformities. So moving on, here is a section where the application was determined to be in conflict with. As I mentioned, the property has 2 units, whereas the current zoning only permits 1 unit on the parcel. Therefore, we have a non-conforming use. So that means that the 2 existing non-conforming units may not be extended or expanded to any portion of the building or structure not previously put to such use prior to the adoption of the LDRs. Therefore, the proposal to expand into the garage stall, which was not previously used as part of the apartment, would be in violation of LDR section 23.5-3E2. The applicant and the owner are here tonight, and they can also answer any additional questions you may have regarding this application. This concludes staff's presentation.
All right, thank you. Is the applicant sworn in?
I believe Mr. Chair was sworn in.
All right.
Mr. Harris was sworn in.
Yes.
Okay, the applicant and or his architect may make their presentation. You have up to 10 minutes.
I, Jeffrey B. Harris, architect. I'm representing Brian Shear in this matter. Again, I will recuse myself from any vote. The basic premise here is that Mr. Shear was purchased this piece of property based on the fact that it was a larger apartment than it apparently turns out to be as a result of a non-permitted and illegal extension of that. We're asking for an exception to the rule that it can't be expanded to allow him to use the property to the full extent at this point. He has done a lot of work on the property itself, cleaning it up and making it very beautiful, actually, on the outside. He's done a bunch of exterior landscaping, and he is, although he's not here right now, he plans on spending a considerable amount of time in Lakeport. He has another piece of property down here right now as well. That's the amount of information I can give you on the project right now. I know Brian wants to make a few comments himself.
All right, Mr. Chair, if you would like to make your comments now.
Yes, I guess when we purchased the property, again, we were unaware that there was any sort of issue with the city. We did a title search, which brought up basically no information. And it wasn't until later on, after the sale was completed, that we were made aware that the property was in violation of some of the code. And so we were in a situation where we had purchased a property thinking it was one thing, and when in fact it really wasn't what we were expecting. And I think had we known that there was a code violation in place, it would have completely changed our decision on the purchasing the property itself, because we wanted it for those two structures. Further on down the line, so we found out later that there was actually a previous violation that was submitted, but it didn't show up on the title search. I guess that was submitted December 16th, 2020 with regards to this, but it wasn't available on the title search. And so again, we were, as a purchaser, we were kind of surprised that it was brought back in, or we had, these are things we found out sort of after the fact, after we had purchased the property itself. So again, we want to make sure that the property is followed to code. We are in this for the long term. We want to make sure the property is improved. We have plans to improve the landscaping and the exterior of the property itself, but this issue is completely changes the use for it, and that's why we're appealing this decision with the city.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next, I think we need to ask if there are any public comment cards. And again, these are to be read, but the board is not to consider that as part of the decision. Is that correct?
The board may listen to the comments, but any factual evidence, any attempt to introduce new evidence that wasn't considered previously should not be a part of the board's decision. What your options here are to either affirm, uphold the previous decision, or because to finding that it was consistent with the law and supported by the facts, or to reverse the decision and find that it was not consistent with the law, or was arbitrary and capricious, and that it was not supported by any evidence.
Okay, thank you.
So I have two letters. And I'll just say briefly that both are in support of the DRO decision. And the first one is from Porter Smythe at 1101 North Palmway. Is in agreement with the zoning analysis. The two existing units are considered a legal non-conformity, and the proposed use of the building two is illegal based on our interpretation of the city property file documentation. The subject property was issued a permit to construct a single-story garage with service quarters. The documentation file contains a residential property card, which consists of a drawing of a garage and a room. We know the city's definition of an apartment must contain a kitchen. We cannot find any documentation of a kitchen in building two. Therefore, it cannot be used as a legal non-conforming garage apartment. The previous owner illegally used building 2 as a separate residence, and the realtor resold the property as such. We therefore, in support of dismissal of the application, we support the restoration of property to the historical integrity. The second letter probably has a little bit more in it than maybe was introduced in the original case.
I think we can, the board having been advised of what they are to consider and not consider in making their decision, I think we can.
You can hear the entire letter in its entirety.
Rather
Okay.
than trying to parse out. what
Okay.
we heard or not.
All right.
So this is also requesting the board to deny the approval or to uphold the DRO decision. The intent of the unpermitted garage conversion was to create an additional rental income unit. Mr. Scher listed the main house as a rental 6 days after closing on the property, and is currently rented with no active business license. All unpermitted work should be removed, returning it to the original 1 residential, 1 bedroom and a garage. The unit was permitted in 1949 as service quarters and garage. In the 1950s, terms such as garage apartment was used because of the racial connotation of the term service quarters. This did not make them legal rentable apartment units. Bo Allen, the Allen Family Trust, performed the unpermitted work and was the listing agent. He advertised the property as home plus cottage, Airbnb, multi-generation living, live-in main house, and rent the cottage to offset expenses. He sold the property to Mr. Resendez, and when Mr. Allen couldn't clear the code violations, he became the selling agent again. Mr. Allen was also the rental agent for Mr. Scher. There have been 5 code cases regarding these conversions starting in November 2019. All closed and reopened. One was closed because William Waters said there was a new state law that could not hold a current owner responsible for unpermitted work of a prior owner. He misread. I suggest that Mr. Scher take this up as a civil matter with Mr. Bo Allen and Mr. Resendez. Unfortunately, the charm of this historic house is gone, and this is from Mr. Anthony Dyjach, DYJACH, 1101 North Conway.
Okay, thank you very much. Does city staff have any questions for the applicant or the affected party?
No, we don't. I think Mr. Allen wants to do a public comment. He's online, so I will promote him to panelist. He can have his 3 minutes.
All right.
Mr. Allen, if you could unmute and turn on your video, please.
Hello. Can you hear us?
Go ahead, you have your 3 minutes.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Yes, we can.
All right,
Yes.
very good. I would just tell you that we have a long history with this home. Because the first home that we ever owned in Lake Worth was right across the street from this house back in the early 80s. And at that time, Thorval Sanchez, who was the owner, he had the apartment rented to Charles Siegel, who was a local resident artist here. And the garage was incorporated into the living space at that time. Subsequent to that, there was another gentleman who rented in there, Deco Don, who many of you may know from the Deco furniture store up on Dixie Highway. And again, the interior of the garage was closed in and it was part of the living area. We purchased the home when Mr. Sanchez passed away and we renovated it. We did permits for all the work that was done there. And the city was on the property on a regular basis. Nothing was done covertly or secretively. It's a wide open lot, open to the street. You can see everything that's going on in that corner. We did do the renovation. We sold it to Mr. and Mrs. Rendez, and they subsequently decided to sell it. And we found out that was because of Porter, the gentleman whose first letter you read across the street, was making their life miserable with turning them in for code violations. We found that out after we sold the house to Mr. and Mrs. Scher. I represented Mr. and Mrs. Scher in the purchase of that home for them. And then all of this happened subsequent to that. So there was some mention about there were code violations that we couldn't get cleared, and so we sold it to the Schers. Well, that's an absolute bold-faced lie. There were no violations, and if you look at the records there, that will bear that out. And we're certainly here to answer any questions. Do you have anything to say?
I mean, I think it's a shame that the city gave the title company that closed this transaction when Mr. Scher bought the property. The city told the title company that there were no code violations. It's called a municipal lien search. They were asked in writing, they responded. And then 2 weeks after he buys the property, a disgruntled neighbor manipulates and uses code enforcement to have a grudge with his neighbor. And he's chased my son down the street with a shovel. He's gone after me with lawn tools. He screamed and yelled at Aaron. He's got some issues, and he definitely doesn't like Bo Allen. That was his best friend that wrote the other letter that you got to hear all nice things about me. So I feel bad for Mr. Scher because I think the city let him down when they didn't respond to the title company and notify them prior to closing. The Schers lost their rights. The city didn't give them a chance to know, and that's a shame. And that's the real reason why I think you should reverse the decision. There was never notice given.
Thank you very much. So does the applicant have any questions for city staff? The answer is no. Do board members have questions for the affected parties? Let's start over there with Mr. Pickett.
Mr. Chair, you mean for the appellant or for the staff? I don't believe we have any of that.
Yes, for the appellant. Yes, thank you.
This is somewhat of a legal question of we're not supposed to take on new information, then how do we take on the information of we were given that permits were issued for the work that was done, and how do we verify that?
We can address that. I mean, we did consider the permits that were pulled in this case, and that was part of our research. We didn't, it wasn't specifically addressed in the staff report, but in the letter, the permits history was reviewed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is what is a legal non-conforming use. If the use had been legally expanded, then we wouldn't be in this predicament. It was not. And the permits that were pulled for the closure of the carport and the conversion, there were no permits pulled for that. There was a plumbing permit.
There was mechanical, electrical, things like that. There was a roof replacement permit, window replacement permit, but nothing in the history that would ever show that garage bay was enclosed.
And further, a lien search is just that, a lien search. And we can get into the code enforcement process, but a notice of violation is not a code lien. So those are different things. So a code lien is at the end of the process when you're receiving daily fines and the magistrate assesses a lien to your property. So there was no lien. The city staff would have responded. If there was a lien at the time, they would have provided if there was a lien.
I would add to that this is really an appeal from a zoning determination concerning the zoning status of the property, and because the existence of a nonconformity, a legal nonconformity, is a zoning determination, which it could be cited as a code violation, but it also pertains to the zoning status of the property. And so the decision that's being appealed from is the decision that has determined that the property is not in compliance with the zoning code.
Okay. Other questions from board members?
So this is not a question of whether it's a historical improvement to the property or it's a zoning question.
It's a zoning question.
And it's in this area is zoned single family, which is public information. There is no duplexes around there.
There are instances similar to this where either a true duplex or a single family structure plus a little apartment in the back were developed over time, but our current zoning doesn't allow that. If those units were permitted legally and have maintained business licenses and are in good standing, then they can continue. It's a grandfathered use. You just can't expand them.
And so it's, we're not saying the apartment use isn't permitted, it's the expansion of the
Yeah.
apartment use. So it's the additional, is it 200? It's like 200 and change.
But the basis of, what is the basis here is zoning. It's not a
Strictly zoning.
historical look or materials or whether it's comparable, it's something that's acceptable. So why is it here?
So the Historic Resources Preservation Board is also the zoning board for all properties within the historic.
Oh, it's true. Okay.
So this is, so you'll see issues that are historic preservation, zoning, combination of the two.
So our question is a very tight little question. Did the DRO err in his decision-making, or did he correctly interpret the code?
Correct, and we, Abe has thrown up the section of the code for you to look at, it's subsection E.
Mhm. And all of this is disregarding any who got a permit or didn't get a permit, and at when and where. It's just is the
If the entire space had been legally permitted and converted, then we wouldn't be here.
Mhm.
If it was if the entire space was permitted back in the 50s, 60s, anytime before the single family zoning was established, then it would not be here today. We would honor the legal non-conformity.
Yeah.
But we were not able to, those records were not provided.
Okay.
Within the state's records.
How about comments from Mr. Guthrie and Ms. Fox?
I have a question on the number one, when this property has always been zoned single family. However, it was allowed to have a structure with the garage with a quote unquote service quarters added to it. And when that was done, that would be similar to what is attempting to be done elsewhere in the city with a stipulation that it may not be rented out or cannot be construed as a rental unit. It is only like a guest quarters or something like that. How does that and just that, besides don't even want to get into whether the permitting of bathrooms or kitchens or whatever was in there. When it was constructed, it did have a service quarters attached to the garage, right?
That is true, Chip. But there were several pieces of documentation in the property file that call it and reference it a garage apartment throughout its history, and it's maintained an independent business license for quite some time. So at some point in the building's past, the city did recognize it as a legal unit.
And we don't know at that time whether the garage was a part of that or whether it was just a service quarters off of the garage.
We have no record of the legal conversion of the garage area. So if it was done without a permit, or there is no record of that permit. So we have no record of that area being converted with the building.
From looking at our oldest records, I can say apart from the plans, we have the property cards. Here we have the one from the 50s. Yes, the one from the 40s did reference it as service quarters, but already here, this one from the 50s was already calling it a garage apartment. So we kind of piece all of that together, the plans, and like they said, the business license history to understand how it functioned historically.
I'm getting from this that the house and then the garage were built. Sometime after it was built, single family residential zoning was put in place. But that was grandfathered in. And when it's grandfathered in, it's essentially frozen in place. Like you can keep it, but it has to stay in its configuration.
I think that's correct.
So now it's no longer in configuration.
Right, and if you could put the code up, Abe, the exact code language, the code expressly says in subsection E, No non-conforming use of structure may be extended to any portion of a building or structure not previously put to such use prior to the adoption of the regulation giving rise to the non-conformity.
Personally, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very tight question and it is pretty clear. The tight question is the DRO's saying that it is an illegal expansion of a nonconformity, correct or not?
Absolutely, and it's not like this is not heartstrings or we don't feel sympathy for Mr. Scherer. I mean, there of course are, you know, we have heartfelt appreciation of the situation he's in, but the DRO's determination was that our hands were legally tied in this matter.
So Mr. Scherer has separate options to, I guess.
So the garage apartment can remain, but the garage stall will have to be turned back into just that.
Into the garage.
Right.
Okay. Let's see, Ms. Fox, we haven't heard from you. Anything further?
I think what we're doing right now is just not all this, what we've been hearing, and my heart goes out to you, but that's not our job tonight. Our job is to just say if what has been ruled is correct and it looks, you know, like it is.
That said, I guess.
I need to say something. I have something else. When we're looking at the photographs of what is there now, you can see the indentation of the garage door. Very obvious. However, you can also see that there's no curb cut there. So it has been like this for a period of time. If you say that the structure and that space that is denoted in the photograph as the garage, and that he has to turn it back into a vehicle parking spot. Are we there? Okay. Does that require him to have a curb cut made, a driveway installed? Are we going to require that, or is that something that he's going to have an empty room that he cannot use?
I think that is out of our view. That is not part of what we are deliberating on right now. We are deliberating on a very tight little issue of whether the DRO's comments were correct or not.
No, I believe that the review official has made the correct determination that this was not legally turned into or expanded into that garage to make it a larger apartment. That was not legally done. So the question is, okay, so the ending up the decision of this board tonight will, in effect, leave a room that's unusable?
To answer your question, Chip, to remedy this situation, the garage would be reconstituted.
You'd have to become a garage.
Driveway, garage door,
A variety
garage
of
stall.
other things, I mean, we have seen accessory units used for additional living space if they remove the kitchen. If they want to use them, we took away the parking, so we can't use it. No, but it wasn't an accessory dwelling.
What I'm asking, I guess, in this particular case, there is nothing that any owner, not this owner, not the previous owner, not the next owner, will be able to do to the secondary structure on this property, which is the garage and the apartment. They will not be able to do anything with that other than keep it in the same configuration it is. They won't be able to come back with plans showing.
It's required parking for the ADU. So the conversion of the garage removed the required parking, increase the nonconformity of the site is what Jordan just told me.
Right.
Also, if they were to convert it to, yes, if they were to convert it to living area, not rent it separately and remove the kitchen, we've seen some of those accessory buildings being used for living space, but they have to provide parking. They have to come in for a COA. I mean, that.
Totally different situation, right? Yeah. And historically, this structure is a garage with a living or a habitable space attached to it. And so what we're really talking about here is the expansion into the garage.
Correct, correct.
Okay, so anything other than the garage with a living space does not meet the historic requirements.
Right, and any other configuration or use, they would have to come in and meet the zoning code and then look at that in its entirety. And that would be a case, an application before the conversion or a modification would be made. So they have to meet.
In the image on the left-hand side, is that a fence that divides the property from the front house?
No, it's along the back alleyway.
No, there's another fence between the
I
property.
believe there is.
There is another fence.
So there's a fence in between the house and the garage apartment.
It looked like it.
But again, I think we are getting off of our duty for this evening. There are many options that the owners have, including litigation, I'm sure. But our purview tonight is only that one question with the whether
continue with the nonconformity.
Correct.
Or allow them to expand the nonconformity. And it's pretty plain in the LDRs 23.5-3 that you cannot expand something that's already in nonconformance.
That's right. Can I hear a motion?
So moving to deny upholds the arrow decision, right? Okay. I move to deny the Hrpb project number 21-124-00003, an appeal of the development review official decision interpreting the city's land development regulations to disallow expansion of the legal non-conforming garage apartment.
Do I hear a second?
I second.
Second by Ms. Fox. Any additional comment before we take a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. The motion to deny passes unanimously.
Sorry.
So shall we move on to the next project, which I think is 226 South L Street.
Just one moment, Chairman, we'll get that loaded up.
Okay.
Abe, it's on the, not the correct view.
Oh, sorry.
So again, for the record, this is Jordan Hodges, Senior Preservation Coordinator. I'll be presenting this item. So this is a request for a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new 840 square foot accessory structure and a historic waiver to exceed this accessory structure limitation for the property located at 226 South L Street. Next slide. So this is a 25-foot wide parcel located on the east side of South L Street. You can see that parcel outlined in red on your maps. The property currently has a single family use and is in the low density multifamily zoning district. Next slide. Here you can see a survey of the property. The existing residence is a very small cottage to the front of the lot and a large elevated rear wood deck. The rear of the lot is currently unimproved. Next slide. So the cottage was constructed around 1925 in a frame vernacular style. This is a property appraiser's card from the 1940s. You can see the front structure used to be longer than what it is today, which was due to an addition that was later removed. Also, there used to be a frame garage apartment to the rear of the structure that has since been demolished. Next slide. So this building sat largely vacant for many years with rehabilitation proposals reviewed by the Hrpb in 2006 and 2013. But the majority of those improvements never materialized, aside from the partial demolition of that rear addition that we saw on the property card. But in May 2016, the current property owner received approval for a new 2-story addition, a new 1-story detached garage, and a historic waiver to allow a new front stoop to encroach into the front setback, as well as a pre-construction approval for a historic preservation tax exemption. Additionally, the application included a request for a variance from the building lot coverage requirements, which was not approved. Now, in January of 2017, a revision to that scope of work was approved for the tax exemption that greatly reduced the size of the addition and eliminated the construction of the detached garage. The revised application proposed replacing the structure's windows, doors, roof, and siding, and the construction of a small 205 square foot laundry, storage, and pergola addition on a rear elevated deck. But the property did receive a full interior renovation, including upgrades to all mechanical and plumbing systems. The revision application was approved, and the historic preservation ad valorem tax exemption was revised to reflect that new scope of work. And you can see the result of that 2017 approval here on the slide. Next slide. So these were the plans from that 2017 tax exemption approval. You can see how little the front cottage is in the rear deck with the 2 small additions. I believe these contain, the little additions contain a storage closet and the laundry facility for the property. Next slide. But here's some current photos. The property was awarded a historic preservation award by the Hrpb, I believe in 2018. You can see the plaque to the right of the door. Next slide. This is to the rear of the property on the wood deck. You can see one of the small 2-room additions and the pergola, the connecting pergola. Next slide. And this is at the very rear of the property, and you can see the stairs coming down from the deck and that small little single room addition. Next slide. Okay. So this is the proposed site plan. You can see the existing structure with the rear deck and pergola that we just saw in the photos. But beyond that is a central yard and a new 2-story accessory structure. Now, please keep in mind that this is an accessory structure and not an accessory dwelling unit. Although the property is zoned multifamily, the parcel does not meet the minimum lot width or area provisions required to accommodate more than a single-family residence and accessory dwelling units. And accessory structures, and that can be detached garages, tool sheds, or additional living space. So it's a separate building, but it has to function with the primary structure. It can't be rented out independently or operate separately. But the application, as proposed, meets the minimum off-street parking requirements and complies with all impermeable surface requirements, building coverage allotments, and required setbacks, with the exception of the accessory structure size limitation. So accessory structures are limited to 40% of the area of the principal structure, but the proposed accessory structure comes in at 136% of the area of the primary. The applicant has applied for a historic waiver for relief from that provision, but we'll get to that momentarily. Next slide. These are the interior plans. You can see on the bottom, you do have a single car garage with an overhead door from the alley, and then there's a pair of swing doors leading into the courtyard, and I believe a little washer dryer downstairs. You do have a set of exterior stairs running up to the 2nd floor, and that is the habitable living area. So this this building essentially serves as the master bedroom for the little cottage. So at the front, you have a bedroom, there's a large closet or dressing room, there's a little wet bar right when you walk in, and then a bathroom to the rear of the building. And then you can see the roof plan to the right. So these are the elevations. Thank you, Abe. It's a 2-story building. The roof is a flared Dutch gable with some broad overhanging eaves. The base of the building is clad in stucco. The second floor which hosts the living quarters, that is in a lap siding similar to the front structure. But the building features, it's proportioned nicely. There's not long expanses of blank facade. The window proportions are typical for the style. Next slide. So these are some perspective renderings of the building. But the massing and placement of the accessory structure is similar to many surviving examples of rear two-story garage buildings from the city's early development history. You can see in the perspective renderings, the structure sited to the rear of the lot. The picture in the bottom right corner, you can see that there's kind of this continuous wall, a 6-foot wall, that does provide the property some privacy from the rear alley, but it is set back sufficiently from the alley. Next slide. So this is the proposed streetscape elevation. As you can see, some of the roof of that rear structure is going to be visible from South L Street. But streetscape elevations are used to determine your massing and spatial compatibility on a street. The street to the south, what is that, 228 and 230, that is a vacant parking lot. Next slide. So again, the Historic Preservation Ordinance lays out the visual compatibility criteria for new construction, and that was analyzed on pages 6 through 11 of your staff report. But generally, the project was found to be compatible with the Southeast Lucerne Historic District and generally complies with all criteria laid out in 23.5-4K. Next slide. Additionally, it's similarly designed as a frame vernacular structure. Staff did find that the architectural features, the spatial arrangements, and the exterior detailing were largely compatible with the design guidelines portion on frame vernacular architecture. Next slide. So for the historic waiver, so the code language pursuant to 23.3-10C8, which is accessory structures. So all accessory structures shall not exceed 40% of the gross floor area of the principal structure, or 1,000 square feet, whichever is less. So again, the existing single-family structure's gross floor area is only 617 square feet. So the maximum allowable square footage of an accessory structure at this property is only 247 square feet. The current request is around 840, which again is 136% of the gross floor area. But section 23.5-4R2, that lays out the LVR provisions that may be waived through the use of a historic waiver, and that includes area requirements. So the applicant is requesting a historic waiver to waive the accessory structure area limitation. Next slide. So historic waivers are only eligible to historically designated buildings, and as this is a contributing resource within the Southeast Lucerne District, it is eligible. But the section provides 4 criteria that the applicant must meet to be provided a waiver. Those criteria are on your screens along with staff's responses. Ms. Fairfax also provided answers to the criteria in her justification statement. Those were provided in your packet, but we'll just go through those quickly. And then you can discuss them with her as much as you'd like. The first criteria is in regards to a building's harmony with the general appearance and character of the neighborhood or district. Staff did find that the building was generable as outlined in the historic preservation analysis. The second criteria regards minimal auditory and visual impacts on adjacent properties while affording the property owner a reasonable use of the land. Staff did not find that the accessory structure would have a substantial impact on surrounding properties in those regards. The third criteria regards injuries to the area that would be, injuries to the area that would be detrimental to public health, safety, or welfare. Again, staff did not find that a waiver to allow the construction of the building would be detrimental to public welfare. And lastly, that the waiver or modification is the minimum necessary to allow reasonable use of the property while preserving its historical attributes. So the applicant contends in their justification statement that the historic waiver is the minimum necessary to allow reasonable use of the property while preserving the character of the historic cottage. Now, the existing historic cottage did receive a tax exemption. It did receive a historic preservation award. So the cottage in its existing configuration was found by the Hrpb to be an outstanding project in its existing state. And I'm sure Ms. Fairfax would be happy to elaborate on any of that. Next slide. But in conclusion, the proposed accessory structure is sited in an appropriate location and designed in a historically compatible manner, utilizing appropriate materials that are in compliance with the design guidelines. So staff is recommending approval for the certificate of appropriateness. Staff recommends that the Hrpb review the historic waiver criteria to determine if the accessory structure limitation provision may be waived. We have included conditions of approval, or we can go ahead and turn it over to Ms. Fairfax.
Let's go through the conditions of approval.
So,
Hi there.
one second, Mr. Chairman. So for the
Hold on, Anne, the chairman would like to go through the conditions.
so there are two conditions. The first are for the COA. Number one is that the windows shall be recessed in the walls and shall utilize a historically compatible trim and sill detail. Two is our standard divided light request for the raised triangular or raised applied exterior muntins. Number three is our glazing standard. Number four, that asphalt shingles that they're requesting shall be dimensional or architectural. 3 tabs shall not be permitted. Number five is that the overhead garage door, that's the one fronting the alley, shall utilize a vertical plank, recessed panel, or flush panel design, and excluding raised panel designs. Number six is that all improved surfaces shall be set back a minimum of 1 foot from the property lines. Number 7, 8, and 9 deal with its use as an accessory structure. So the accessory structure shall not be utilized as an accessory dwelling unit. The accessory structure shall not have a kitchen facilities as defined in the city's LDRs. Future alterations that would lead to the conversion of the structure to an accessory dwelling unit shall be prohibited. And number 9, the accessory structure shall not be granted an additional utility meter from the Public Utilities Department and shall not be issued a rental license from the Lake Worth Beach Business License Division. Next slide. That is a condition of approval for the waiver. And that's essentially saying that this waiver is project specific. So if there was the property ever burnt down, was destroyed, anything to that effect, you would not be able to just come in and build an accessory structure at 136% of the primary by right. So if anything happens to the structure, the waiver goes away.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. So we have 2 different approvals to make here. Does the applicant have some additional comments to make?
I would just like to thank the board for allowing me to have an informal review 2 months ago. I also wanted to thank the staff, Jordan and Abraham and William Waters, all worked very closely with me to come up with a solution that would allow us to expand the usage of this pretty small and modest property so that we could have full use of it. I really appreciate it. I think the historic waiver is a great program, and I didn't know about it before it was introduced as a solution to what we wanted to do. So just wanted to thank you. And if you have any specific questions, I think what we'd like to do also, instead of an asphalt shingle roof, if we could match the wood shingle that is currently on the addition that we put on. And there's also wood shingle on the tiny little overhang at the front of the very front of the house. Yes. So I have not replaced the roof, but it needs replacing on the main house. And I was just waiting. I was going to put wood shingle on that too. I believe that would be a compatible material for the historic district.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That would mean that you would prefer to change certificate of appropriateness item number 4 from asphalt shingles to wood shingles.
Staff has no objection to that.
All right. Do we have any comments from the public?
Yes, I have 2 comments. And the first is from Cliff Kohlmeyer, 503 First Avenue South. And he says that he's in support of the certificate of appropriateness and historic waiver for the construction of a new accessory structure of roughly 840 square feet at 226 South L Street. Parcel would benefit from this addition of a 1-car garage and an upstairs bedroom, which are lacking in the existing structure. And the design is faithful to the size of the original building and the historic scale of the neighborhood. My own home is just a few blocks away, and I think this accessory structure would enhance the neighborhood. Sincerely, Cliff Kohlmeyer. And I have one other one from Mr. Richard Stowe, 414 North Federal Highway. Also in support, I write in wholehearted support of the application for historic waiver at 226 South L Street submitted by Ms. Fairfax. It is my understanding that without historic waiver approval, this project would be inconsistent with current land use regulations. From the vantage point of my contributing historic home at 414 North Federal Highway, that is a cruel irony. I have to look no further than across the alley behind my house to see a 2-story structure constructed in 1925 at 411 North Ocean Breeze, with an apartment on the 2nd floor and a garage adjoining our shared alley. That 2-story structure is separated from the main house by a courtyard. One issue with attaching additions to our historic houses in those additions may reduce natural lighting. Prior to a porch addition, my current kitchen had 3 windows. After my porch was added at the rear of my house in 1945, it covered 2 of the exterior windows, greatly reducing the natural lighting in my kitchen. If an attached garage was required, it would seriously compromise this historic 25 by 135 foot lot. The Fairfax design is exemplary in that, unlike many applications recently approved or currently under review by the Historic Board, it minimizes the footprint of additional impervious surfaces, and the separation of the 2 buildings offer the space for an interior garden. This is accomplished by skillfully siting a petite 2-story structure adjacent to the alley. I encourage you to approve this application and use it as a model for any future revisions to our land use regulations that the Historic Board may consider.
Thank you.
Those are the 2 comments.
Thank you very much. Board members' comments, please. Let's start with Mr. Harris.
Well, this is a lovely little building. It's a little misleading in the street elevation, because of course that's the elevation that you never ever see. You never see a building flat like that. So it seems a little higher than I think it'll actually read. But other than that, I think that previous comment is spot on. This is the kind of development we should be looking to have more of, really, within the city, I think.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Martin.
Yes, I wanted to ask about this exception that is being mentioned. Is this something new, or is it something that was readily available? I'm thinking of the presentation last week for similar size lots.
Oh, you're talking about the historic waiver?
Yeah, the historic waiver. This.
Did we have it left?
Can you use it for new construction?
So that's okay. So its application in this case is somewhat novel for how we've used it in the past. Typically, historic waivers are used for if you're rehabilitating a historic building.
Okay.
It's not in compliance with the current zoning code, but say you cross a substantial improvement threshold. threshold or something like that, that would force the whole building to come into compliance with the current code. You can use a historic waiver for things like setbacks or impermeable surface or building lot coverage to be able to keep that building in its historic configuration. So what Ms. Fairfax is kind of, or how this would be utilizing the waiver is that the historic building on this site has already been rehabbed. It's been done nicely, and to do an addition to it, especially, you know, a 2-story or garage addition, wouldn't really serve the property. It's already been rehabbed to an excellent degree. So can you use a historic waiver?
Can you use it for, because now you have this structure, which is larger and it's waived for a property that's historical. Can you use kind of that pattern into new development?
So it would have to be kind of in conjunction with, you couldn't use it for a brand new building.
You cannot.
It has to be connected to a contributing structure,
And I
or at
think-
least the development does.
Right, and I think the link here is that the separating the building better preserves the principal structure.
Right.
So in that case, what we did, because we had never, this type of application using the historic waiver had never come before the board in this way, and we actually brought it in a conceptual review, and we ran the idea past the board. Is would you be willing to open this up and say, you know, historically it had never been used in this way, but there's not a prohibition to use it in the way in the code. So it was just a, the way it was applied historically by boards in the city was that was only for the historic structure itself. So kind of there was a discussion in an instance like this where the new construction would need the waiver to allow it not to touch the existing construction, and then that would further preserve the existing building, the existing historic building. And that was a new concept, and the board seemed to be, at least conceptually, wanted to see this project back to take on that discussion point.
But it is only available to
For existing.
contributing building, designated building. So
Now, the only point I would like to make is that this presents a perfect opportunity. We want to maintain this kind of look to the town. And we have smaller lots, that this be studied in a way that we could, because people can't differentiate out in the market. I wouldn't differentiate whether it's an old house or it's a brand new building. I look at what's there and I say, so I can do the same and replicate it in a new project.
And I think I see where you're getting at. The reason why they're here for the waiver is because the original structure, the principal house, is very tiny.
Yes.
Okay, so most of the time when we see this configuration come in, they're not getting a waiver for the 2-story accessory unit. That can happen now under our code.
Okay.
All this can happen under our code,
Okay.
except for the fact that the principal structure is itty bitty.
Okay.
Right, so then we've got a much bigger, 136% larger. Normally an accessory structure is diminutive compared to the principal. It's what, 40%, over 1,000 square feet. So because in this case, to preserve the itty bitty little one, you know,
Yeah.
they want to do a bigger one.
Yeah, I understand that part.
So that's where the historic waiver comes in. So it's not like this configuration is prohibited. I know there was a public comment to that effect. That's not correct. It's a 2-story garage with an apartment over that is allowed in the code.
Okay,
The only waiver is for the size of the accessory
great,
building.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, perhaps Mr. Guthrie?
What you just said, Aaron, about on a 25-foot lot, a garage with an apartment over it is now allowed in this zone?
Just, I meant a garage, garage with living space. If it was on a 50-foot lot in this zone, it would be a garage apartment.
correct.
Okay, and then I had that question too, when you're saying that this is indicative of other similar properties found throughout the city. When you get into the 25, yes, I'm very familiar with tons of them on 50-foot lots, but are there that many of them in this configuration with a accessory structure, living space above a garage on 25-foot lots?
They are more rare, but they are there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my other concern is that after this particular owner, this sells the property in the future, it says in the staff's analysis, it talked about how this was the minimum. This is the minimum thing that the applicant could do in order to gain useful use of the property. I was looking at that, I'm going, it is not necessarily the minimum that somebody could do. And if somebody had a house, the house, like you said, in the front is 600 square feet.
Sure.
Pardon me?
No, I'm just following along with you.
Okay.
What you're touching
600
on
square
is,
feet.
what you're touching on is historic waiver criteria D. So those are things that you all need to make findings on as a board. So criteria, A through D, those are how you grant waivers. So
okay, and I'm looking at this at the waiver portion of it. I always try to look at precedent because this can only be requested as a waiver to a already contributing structure or property. This is not going to be duplicated throughout the town in any other case on 25-foot lots.
well, someone could come, if someone had a similar application or a similar situation to where they had a smaller cottage at the front of the lot that they did not want to do a massive addition to or a larger addition to, someone could come forward with a similar application. But again, it would be up to the board to look at the criteria, to look at the design, to see if it fits in with the parcel and the community. So it could come back, but they are, I can't imagine someone coming back with this exact application.
Well, no, that is a very unique property.
I did want to sort of, if I, and it may, I didn't have to get an historic waiver if I smashed the building up against the existing building. So I would, as of right, could be granted without any kind of, brouhaha about it, to push this thing up against the existing house. I mean, you have the discretion of not approving it because I think it does compromise the integrity of the historic structure. So thus, we went through these kind of hoops to get this further away. And I do think that the way that it's drawn, it slopes more, the land slopes off more than we're showing. So it will be dropped down it'll have less of an impact on the neighborhood than the drawings actually show. So really, I mean, it's only a waiver because of the size, but it wouldn't be a waiver at all if I smashed it up against the building.
Right.
So okay. It just kicked in that suddenly the size became an issue. And so I think every situation will be different. Certainly because this house is exceptionally small, the percentage of it, the 40% part of it is, not worth building. We made it just big enough for one car and that was it. And we didn't try to have a bigger bedroom up there or anything, sort of like the minimum.
Yeah, thank you.
But thanks again. I really appreciate it. I was never sworn in. I just wanted to say that.
And can you please turn on your video? Let's remedy that, please.
Let's get you sworn in. There you go.
Can we she say that she heard the testimony she
Testimony
provided?
that she has given was the truth.
Yes, please raise your right hand. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you gave was the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? If so, say yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. We have.
My comments had more to do with it being a separate structure. And like she said, if it were made as an addition to the front structure, we wouldn't be really looking at it possibly wouldn't be looking at it. There might be some size issues as well. But my issue was with it being separated from the front building. I think it's a great design. I like the design itself. I just want to make sure that we're not stepping on our own toes for future precedent, especially dealing with these small 25-foot lots that we're getting into. It meets all the other criteria. And I think it'll be a very nice addition. I'm familiar with the neighborhood and familiar with the first house that she did a wonderful job on bringing back.
Yeah.
So I would
Thank
vote in
you.
favor of it.
Thank you, Chad. Ms. Fox, any additional comments, or are you okay?
How much of a difference is there between the house facing the street and this house? It looks huge. And I know we've talked about that when they were additions as opposed to separate entities. And my other question on that picture on top right, is that a garage door going into the courtyard?
Yes, we think that we might pull the car forward through the garage so that we could have more than one car on the property. We also have a boat that might go through the garage and into it's just kind of a utility access door.
Okay. Well, my question was mainly on the height, because I know we've had a lot of discussions on that, on additions. But this, if you go back, if you can find me that picture of what it looked like from the front of the house. So that looks pretty big.
Well, I have to say,
It's also, you're not seeing it in perspective because that is set way back.
you would never see it.
I doubt whether you'll even see it. If you stand on the street now, you'll see that you really can't get yourself, your eyes won't really perceive it. I mean, that was our intent.
Those were the two questions I had.
Okay, Mr. Pickett.
Yeah, I echo Chip's sentiments. I think that this is it's a really good solution. Right? I like what I'm looking at. I just want to make sure that we're navigating it appropriately. I have one question as far as if it was new construction. That's the only question I'm going to ask about new construction. Is there a minimum size of a single family home that you would be required to build on a lot? There
are minimum units or
minimum unit
bedroom
size.
sizes, minimum unit sizes. So there's a minimum, you have to meet the minimum living space requirements in the code.
Mm-hmm.
So every code has a minimum size for kitchen facilities. And then I believe it's 600 square feet or it's 600 square feet for one bedroom, I want to say.
It's 400.
Again, that's for new construction though.
Yeah, but there are size requirements. And then in addition, the interior, you want the overall space, but then you have to measure inside that there's enough space for, a bedroom and a kitchen and a little living area.
Just looking for some sort of guidance as far as, but other than that, as far as the waiver goes, and us looking at it being an accessory structure, and the other, some of the other projects that we reviewed as well, looking at it from the standpoint of it being subordinate, being taller than the main structure, the primary structure, that type of thing. I'm just wondering how we go about that when we have talked about other garages, things like that, that we require that the peak of the roof be below the primary structure, that type of thing. So
I think
I'm looking for a way to get through this because I think it is a good solution, but I just want to make sure that
I think, and I fully understand what you're saying. I think a lot of that has to do with, what is going to, in the public realm, on the street, what is your bigger impact? When we were looking at, raising the roof of that garage a few months ago, that was right on the street, and you could absolutely look facade to facade with the house next to it. You could feel that it was taller. It was going to be very present. This one is pushed all the way back to the lot, right to the back of the lot. It is substantially taller. It is 2 stories, but that's a common development pattern that we have. So I think that, totally on the right track. Absolutely, very astute observation.
I think we need.
I think you can make those judgments.
Yeah,
I just think we need to codify this, obviously not tonight, but at some point we need to sit down and codify it as a view element rather than height, right? Because the apparent height in that drawing is enormous. But Ann's absolutely right. I mean, if that were actually if that were projected in perspective, it would be much smaller. And as you move around the building, you never see it two-dimensional, just like that.
Well, I've seen certain instances where there's a visual impacts analysis that you can do. I don't know if that's something that you does here, but.
We can look at that. The problem is that, as you add review documents, it increases the expense of application.
Right.
So, do you feel comfortable looking at, the perspective and then the street view? Is that enough that you can use your judgment and say, okay, I understand that it won't read like that because that's an additional, $500, $600, $700 a sheet now for design services.
Okay, I have some of my own comments. First off, I think this is the perfect use of a historic waiver. This is clearly an exceptional property, a tiny property that just couldn't have a 40% addition to it. I think it's very nicely done. I do have an issue with the pitch of that roof. If you go back to that front elevation, I agree with most of the board that that back end will not be seen from the street in any.
Can you go to the streetscape, babe?
However, it seems a bit jarring to me that the house itself has, I don't know, a 4 and 12 pitch, and the addition seems to have a 6 and 12 pitch. It would be nice. I don't think I would require it, but I think it would be nice to at least try a pitch that matched that of the house. That's my first thought.
And hips and gables never match.
Okay, I'm going to address that.
Mhm.
The main historic house is a frame vernacular with just a simple gable. The addition is a hip, and hips and gables are, the pitches are perceived differently.
Yeah, good point. Good point.
They don't really read the same. So, you really wouldn't have a really lower, you shouldn't have a lower pitch
If you
on a
had the
hip.
same pitch as a hip, it would look much lower.
That's good. That's a good point.
Yeah, if you had the same pitch as the gable, on the hip, it would read a lot lower. It has to do with the perception and perspective, the perspectival kind of perception of looking at a roof.
Okay, thank you. Then I have one other issue, and that is there a requirement that the garage floor be above the crown of the road, or is that not true for accessory structures?
And it's living space, and it has to be a habitable space. It has to have an elevation requirement.
Okay, so that
Finished
does
floor.
finished floor of the living space, the habitable space. Okay. Well, other than that, I think it's a wonderful project. I think it is the first probably of more that we will get. And when we get the others, we will be able to evaluate each one separately without considering this as a precedent. So, can I hear a motion?
I move to approve, let me make sure I've got the right thing here.
First, you want to approve the historic waiver, I think.
Oh, that's right, okay.
That page.
Well, they're both on here.
Yeah.
Okay, right, they're both
Like you should both are in the same
right.
motion.
I move to approve HRPB project numbers 21-001 00213 and 21-016-00001 with staff recommended conditions for certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a new 840 square foot accessory structure and the historic waiver from the accessory structure area limitation provision for the property located at 226 South L Street, based upon the competent substantial evidence in the staff report and pursuant to the City of Lake Worth Beach land development regulations and historic preservation requirements.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
Before you
What
vote.
about number 4?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's correct. Number 4, if you would just add or wood shingle
All right,
for the conditions of approval.
all right.
Condition number 4
Yes.
of the certificate of appropriateness will be revised to permit wood shingles as well as asphalt shingles.
That's right.
Thank you.
Okay, now did we have a second?
Second.
Mr. Pickett seconding. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Okay, I take it that the motion has been approved unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Fairfax.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Seeing that project built. Let's move on to 1001 North Lakeside Drive. An in-ground pool.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just one matter, Miss, there, she got it. We were having some trouble promoting it.
So this, again, is a request for a COA to locate a pool in the front yard of the property at 1001 North Lakeside Drive. The request also requires 2 variances, one from the accessory structure location requirement and the other from a front setback requirement. So next slide. So the property is a 50-foot wide platted lot of record in a single-family residential zoning district, and the parcel contains a future land use designation of single-family residential. The application is brought by the property owner, Melissa Larson. You can see the property highlighted in red on the screen. Next slide. So the structure on the property was designed by Edgar Wortman pretty late in his career in 1952. The building has a ranch style plan with frontage on 10th Avenue North. So you can see on the site plan on the right of your screen with North Lakeside Drive at the top of the plan. So the structure was designed, again, so North Lakeside Drive is the front of the lot, but the house was designed to face 10th Avenue North. It is a corner lot. But the structure was sited a little bit differently than the property on the plans illustrate. As you can see, the house was designed with a 40-foot setback from the front from North Lakeside Drive, whereas it was actually constructed with a 28-foot setback. Next slide. Here you can see that 28-foot setback, again, for the front yard. And due to the structure's length, that kind of sprawling ranch style floor plan, the property only has a 22-foot deep backyard. So the structure is kind of situated right on the middle of the parcel. Next slide. So these are some current photos. This was taken from 10th Avenue North and North Lakeside Drive. Next slide. Again, this is the front yard. The kind of angled fencing there was probably for the site visibility triangle, but that is the front yard of the property. Next slide. That is from 10th Avenue North, looking north. Next slide. And this is at the 10th Avenue North Alley intersection, and that is looking into the applicant's backyard. Okay, next slide. And I'm sorry, that's on the front as well. That's looking south from North Lakeside Drive from the property owner to the north. Next slide. So the applicant is this is the proposed site plan. As you can see, the pool is located in the front yard. The applicants do contend that there's not enough room in the backyard for a pool. And if required to be placed in the backyard, they would have to remove mature trees and deal with undergrounded utilities. The applicant is proposing additional landscaping around the existing fence to further limit the view of the pool from the right of way. But again, so if you're thinking on the site, to the bottom of your screen is 10th Avenue North. To the right of your screen is North Lakeside Drive with the pool in the front yard. Next slide. So as you can see, the east wall of the pool starts at a 12-foot 6-inch setback from North Lakeside Drive, well, it'd be from the east property line, whereas a 20-foot setback is required for all structures. So that's one variance, a variance to allow a structure with a 12-foot 6-inch setback, front setback. The second variance is due to the pool's location. So section 23.3-7, which is the single family residential zoning code, stipulates that an accessory structure may not be constructed between any principal structure and the right of way. This provision delegates the placement of accessory structures. So again, detached garages, pool sheds, pools, etc., to rear yards. As this request is placing a pool in the front yard, it will also require a variance from that provision. Now, the original submittal provided by the applicants did have a larger pool and a larger pool deck. That request also required a variance from the front yard landscaping requirements, but they did, through revisions with staff, make the pool and pool deck smaller. So that's no longer necessary. So two variances, one from the front setback requirement, one from the accessory structure location requirement. Next slide. So the power to grant a variance is limited by and contingent upon documentation that all required findings are made by the Hrpb. Variances have 4 criteria that must be met, and staff outlined those criteria and provided answers in the staff report. The applicant also submitted a justification statement providing her own responses. But we'll go through these briefly, and then the applicant, of course, can elaborate further. Criterion A, that is that special circumstances exist which are peculiar to the land or building for which the variance is sought. Staff does find that the historic siting of the building is somewhat peculiar, as the front setback exceeds the customary setback by almost 8 feet. The structure is also very deep, which limits the depth of the rear yard, which is the appropriate place for a pool. Criterion B is that the strict application of these provisions would deprive the property owner of any reasonable use of land or building for which the variance is sought. Staff finds that the property has accommodated a single family use for over 50 years, and strict application of these LDRs would not deprive the applicants of continued use of the land. However, a pool is generally considered a reasonable expectation for most single-family homeowners, and the property owner contends that a pool is necessary for use of their property. Next slide. Criterion C, that is that the variance proposed is the minimum necessary to facilitate reasonable use of the land. Again, staff finds that the variance requested are likely the least necessary to create a pool of a reasonable size and configuration where they are proposing it, which is in the front yard. And criterion D, that the variance is necessary would not be unduly injurious or to contiguous property owners or detrimental to public welfare. Staff finds that the character of the neighborhood does not include pools in the front yard, but that granting one would not be unduly injurious to public welfare. Additionally, the property owner has proposed fencing and hedging that would further screen the pool from view. Next slide. So per the COA approval matrix, pools that are visible from a public right-of-way do require a COA. If you're putting one in your backyard, historic doesn't even review it. But staff reviewed those, the visual compatibility criteria. Those are on pages 7 through 6 of your staff report. Additionally, pools in their locations are not addressed in the design guidelines. But however, it is important to note that the proposed improvement could visually impact the surrounding historic district, particularly the intersection of North Lakeside Drive and 10th Avenue North, where it is atypical for a pool to be located. Of course, pools are historically located to the rear of lots for added privacy and security. The city's LDRs prevent pools from being located within the front yard when it is possible to locate them in the rear. Next slide. In conclusion, due to the unique siting of the principal structure with a 28-foot front setback and the location of mature vegetation in the rear yard, installing a pool that strictly complies with the LDRs has not been found to be reasonably feasible. Therefore, staff recommends approval for the COA for a new pool and associated variances to allow its installation in the front yard, subject to several conditions of approval. There are 3 separate motions, one for the COA and one for each variance, as well as conditions of approval that are tacked on to all of them. So we can kind of go through those now, or we can turn it over to Ms. Larson, who's the property owner.
Let's go through the conditions of approval first.
Okay, so the conditions of approval, the first one is for the COA, and that is new fences and gates. So if they're replacing their fencing, the new fences and gates shall comply with the height and placement requirements of section 23.4-4, which is our fencing code subject to staff review of permitting. We have had some tweaks to that code lately, so if they wanted to come in, they could potentially have a different fencing layout. Number 2, new landscaping shall screen the new pool from view and the right-of-way. A landscape screen of shrub hedging or other continuous decorative landscaping on the side of the fence facing the public right-of-way that is at a minimum height of 24 inches or 1/3 of the height of the fence at installation, whichever is greater, and shall be maintained at no less than 3/4 of the total height of the fence in perpetuity, subject to staff review of permitting. The conditions of approval for the variance for the location and the variance from the front setback are the same. So these are project specific and shall only apply to the scope of work approved under this application. If the pool is destroyed, if anything's rearranged on the lot, they would not be able to construct back in that configuration. And then number 2, that the variance is recorded with the Palm Beach County Clerk of Court, so it appears on the chain of, or on the title chain.
Okay, thank you very much. Does the owner applicant want to make some additional comments?
Hi, I think it was pretty well covered. I will reiterate that the front of the house, which is considered where the pool is at, is actually not where the front door is. There's actually no door on that side, so it doesn't feel like the front of the house. I guess that's really all I have. The other side of the house, which is considered the back of the house, is very small. There is 2 large mango trees, star fruit tree back there, and of course all the sewer, gas, water lines. So it would require quite a bit of stuff. But even still, it would be too small to put a pool in the backyard there, right next to the alley.
Yeah.
And this area, you can't see.
Okay, thank you.
So that's really all I have to say.
Okay. May I ask the secretary, do we have any comment cards or?
No, we do not have any comments for this project.
Okay. Well, then let's go to board members asking questions or making comments to the applicant. Who wants to start?
Exactly where is the front door?
The front door is to the left of the 3 little bushes.
Okay.
I can't.
Okay.
It's right in the middle facing 10th.
There it is.
10th
Okay.
Ave.
All right. However, your address is Lakeside?
It is, yeah. Yeah, my address is 1001 Lakeside, but my front door is right.
It's on 10th.
It's on 10th, yeah.
Okay, my other one was the fence around the pool, which I put a pool in. I know you have to have the fence, so you covered that with the setback of the fence. being, giving room for vegetation around it and so, I like the white picket fence though. Is that
That I just got done, so not too long ago, I had a permit put for that, which is why there's that huge angle on it. It meets, you know, you guys permitted that a little while ago, so it's a little bit too open, so I will be doing the vegetation because certainly no one wants to see me swimming in a pool, nor do I want to see everybody driving by waving, you know? So try to make it a little bit more private without covering up the whole house, because I think that's appropriate in this situation, hopefully.
Okay, other comments? Mr. Pickett?
Yeah, I mean, the way I'm looking at it, even with the addressing and that kind of thing, the pool's actually in what's functionally the side yard. Right? So I don't think that it's really in the front yard. And just as a note, looking at the aerial, the house directly across the street on Gulfview has the exact same configuration. So it's in the neighborhood. It's not like it's precedent setting or anything like that.
Yeah, our code just, it stipulates the short side of the lot.
Mhm.
Whatever's facing the street is the legal front.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and just as a side note, I am pleasantly pleased to see that the fence is going to be installed and it has enough room for planting in front of it, and there's still enough room to use the tiny yard. So.
Okay, other comments, other questions? I have a few questions. Actually, I have a question for staff. The site triangle, the visibility triangle in real life appears much larger than is required. It appears to be about 15 feet on a side. What is the code requirement?
I believe it's 10, and it's measured from the corner of the intersection. So it would be 10 feet in each direction, and then it would make the cross. I can go back and double check for a single family.
It does look pretty substantial in the photo.
I think that the owner is shortchanging herself by
I thought that they told me that that's where it had to be. Like, it looks like it's cutting my yard right in half, but they said, nope, this is exactly where it needs to be. They, meaning the people that put the fence in based on the numbers. I mean, it all got inspected. So I don't know. It seems ridiculously,
yeah, you might want to revisit that.
We can go look at, we can pull the permit and look at it.
And we will, but what I noticed there is we measure from the corner of the roadway. So when we do the side triangle, most people have a sidewalk. And there's no sidewalk at that corner. So the entire side triangle is on her property. So normally we would measure from the street.
Yeah.
So it's a full 10 feet in each direction. So it is 20 feet and then it's across. Normally the sidewalk is included in the side triangle. So it's probably accurate, but it probably why it appears
huge.
Yeah,
you know, because normally there's a sidewalk.
Yeah.
You know.
But if it appeared to be 15 feet to me, so please take a look at it.
Yeah, we can take a look.
I have to say that I have no problem with the variances. I think that yard does function as a side yard. So I don't have a problem with that. I'll tell you what I do have a problem with is the landscape plan. I don't want to have the applicant spend money, but I wish that there were a landscape architect involved who could give us a better version of what is planned. I'm not particularly happy, and it's not part of my job, but not particularly happy at seeing that picket fence go way past the front door and back to the garage. I don't understand what the green and blue and yellow stripes are on the left side. And I wish that the plant material would be identified before it is approved and not just allow that to be approved by staff. So my thought would be to perhaps approve the variances, both of them, but ask for a better landscape plan.
If you wanted to have a condition of approval, like you wanted native landscaping or you wanted drought, I mean, the problem is that really it's the location and we have a lot of requirements for landscaping. landscaping and the types of material and its opaqueness. But latent shrubs and hedges in single family are not like commercial properties. They don't require a permit in the same way that a commercial property requires a landscape plan. So we'll require a landscape plan to show that there is a hedge in front of the fence for the condition of approval, but it's just not regulated the same way a non-residential multifamily or commercial.
Now, we don't even know what the fence is going to look like. We have no information on that.
She wants to use the existing fence.
The existing fence, is that really 4 feet?
I just put a pool in and the fence had to be 6 feet.
So she's probably gonna have to have a pool security fence, which can
Yeah.
be like a small screen fence. That's her front yard. She can't have a fence greater than
4 feet.
4 feet. So,
But I'm not convinced that the picket fence is a full 4 feet. Also,
Yeah.
I don't see on her landscape plan any landscape buffering her from the next door neighbor. I'm sure she'll want to do that, but I'm just not comfortable yet with the specifics of what she's trying to do. I mean, there's a house on this same corner, 1 block over on 11th and Palmway, I guess, or 11th and Lakeside, with a spectacular landscape plan that has, I think, won awards. I'm not asking her to win awards, but I think that landscape plan could be improved and specified. That's my opinion. Other comments from board members?
I'm a bit confused where you say you can only have a 4-foot fence in a front yard. However, required to have a 6-foot fence around a pool. That seems to contradict themselves.
yeah, I mean, we'll talk to there are pool fences that are like, they're pool barriers. They're not fences. So there's a pool barrier that can go around the rim of the pool. That's like, it's like a screen mesh, and when you're done with the pool, you can put it in there. So if it doesn't meet the requirements of the building code, we can work with her on something. So you can't have a 6-foot fence in the front yard. Like
This is a normal application because typically you would have a 6-foot pool fence in the front yard. That's what we're here for. So it's sort of an odd situation, but yeah, it would be, the pool would require to have a security fence that's outside of what the actual perimeter fence for the yard is.
If she comes in for the pool and her pool contractor is, because they do have the screens, if there's not something that she's able to work out, then she would unfortunately have to come back for a fence variance if she can't meet the code and provide the security fence for the building code.
Yeah.
I don't remember it being 6 feet though. For her pool.
I had a pool done. I don't remember it being 6 feet, even though I had a backyard that's 6 feet. What they do look at is the latches and the kids' ability to climb over the fence. They don't like it with openings and things like that. That's what was mentioned to me.
Yeah, she might need the mesh one.
If I can, my boyfriend who's on here as well, but he's not in the chat right now, I don't think, but if he helped me with all this because he did a lot of research on what's allowed and then even like the as far as like the vegetation and stuff, if we could bring him in on the conversation, he might be able to clarify some of this. But as far as like the actual plant, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We're moving him over.
Oh, okay. As far as the actual planting goes, and the fence as well, like I want the plants to be higher than the fence. I didn't really plan on getting like an architect to tell me what kind of plants. I kind of like go with just what tends to look right when I'm doing it, which I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but I want the plants to be higher than the fence so that people can't see in, because of course at a 4 or even 5-foot fence, people would see over. And there's a limited amount of plants that are kind of like in the shrub family that will do that. And I don't have the answer to which ones I would be using at this time. And yes, there needs to be gates as well. And all that stuff I kind of figured would be approved by, like, I wouldn't pass inspection unless it was correct. So I didn't like draw in where that kind of thing was going to go, because it wouldn't be, you wouldn't be able to see it. I don't know. Jim, you want to say anything?
Sure. I was just waiting for the opportunity there. I didn't want to interrupt. So the fence that's in place, it is a 4-foot fence. That's part of the permit, was inspected. And so there's some documentation that supports that. My understanding was 4 foot was the minimum size of a fence for a swimming pool, because it didn't come up as needing a 6-foot fence as a variance for the front yard. And I did look up Palm Beach. It wasn't Lake Worth specific, but it looked like 4 foot was the minimum. I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to, if somebody tells me I'm wrong, I'm going to just have to agree. There are gates that close, so the fence does go all the way around, but you cannot get into the yard. They're actually springed hinged gates, so the gates close themselves and there's a locking latch. And I believe that's code. So as far as where the pool area goes, those gates are in place. There was a question about the lines in the back, the yellow, the blue, and the green. Those are estimated placements is where the utilities are running. I do utility, or I have done utility scanning. In fact, I'm probably going to start my company for utility scanning, but so I just wanted to identify that, because that really made it sort of difficult to put a pool back there as well, having to move all the utilities around. With regard to the landscape, the green is meant to stay as lawn. In the red and orange, where they look kind of like stars, that's where we're going to see, and it would be most likely Florida plants. We're not trying to bring in anything that we haven't seen in the yard. So hibiscus, I believe there's signature hedges, which is what you see around the neighborhood. The only question I had now, the way Missy was talking and what I thought I had heard, was a minimum of no less than 3/4 of the fence. So it sounded like we can go higher than the fence, higher than that. We just can't go less than that. Is that a correct understanding?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And you will, typical with a fence permit, you would need a landscape plan for hedging or screening is what would be required. So you would need a landscape plan because there was a condition to screen it. So that would be required for your planting. So you need a planting plan of some kind. And we would probably look at there's a requirement for having drought tolerant native species that are provide a continuous opaque planting screening. Okay. So that would be by permit. And we have the city has a arborist landscape reviewer who reviews our landscape plans for compliance.
Okay.
Could they actually go to the arborist with their questions and have him direct them what would be?
He will come out and meet them on their property and look at what he's great. He provides great.
That would be a great thing for you to do.
Oh, okay. I will absolutely do that. I didn't know that was a service that was available. And when I did get the permit, just a side note, when I did get the permit for the fence, I did have, I had landscaping all along Lakeside Avenue. Lakeside Drive there. But then we got a recently sidewalk. So those little plants didn't make it, but I will put plants back in there.
Of course, you know that as part of construction, a part of that fence is going to come down just to get the backhoe in there. And
oh yeah, and I'll put it back up. Yeah.
So.
Yes.
Well, other things, my opinion is that I have no problem with the variances, but I'd like to see more information. I don't know how the rest of the board feels. So, could I get a motion of some sort? Or perhaps you want to start with the two motions on the variances.
I think Chip wanted to speak, I believe. Chip.
Oh,
yes,
I'm sorry.
I have a question for staff, and now that the lines, the yellow, which is gas, the green is sewer, and the blue is water lines. If you were to take that swimming pool in the current dimensions and switch it from the right-hand side of the property to the back side of what is marked as a covered carport, would it be able to be put in the space, maintaining the setbacks required from the alley, notwithstanding having to remove the trees? Same dimensions on the swimming pool,
I
12 foot
don't-
by 20
No,
foot.
Chip,
I don't believe so.
The trees.
Doesn't look like.
no.
What is the
I would-
setback from the rear?
I would just make one other comment. I think that's not really called out in here. What's outlined is the covered carport. There is about, and I'm going to guess right now because I can't see the number on the document. It was the drawing that was up there. It did show it. There is it's not measured here. The survey didn't actually measure it. I had to go out and measure it personally. That's why that drawing's there. But there's a slab of concrete that extends beyond the covered carport that goes out. I believe it's 6 or 6 feet. Okay. And
Right.
that sort of narrowed it down to 15. So then basically for that pool, it leaves you 3 feet 9 inches all the way around.
Okay, let me say that they have methods of removing concrete. But,
Yes, sir.
But what I'm saying is if that, okay, forget about the concrete, but with the covered carport in there and leaving maybe a 3 foot section before the pool starts. So the pool is 12 feet, so it'd be 15 feet from the building. What is the setback, minimum setback of a swimming pool from the rear elevation, the rear property line?
5 feet.
5 feet.
5 feet. So technically you could put the pool in the back over there. You'd have to move a water line.
And the
You'd
trees.
have to move the 2 trees and a water line.
Those are huge trees.
I think that would be a lot more,
It's a lot more
a
expensive.
lot more impact to structure and to.
I'm just saying, I kind of understand. I understand what everybody's saying about the pool. It is a side yard. So basically you have 2 side yards. You're requesting the pool to go on the right-hand side yard, which happens to be the front of the property. And what in the staff's presentation, there was something mentioned in there that a swimming pool in the front yard is prohibited. Can you read that again, please, Jordan?
Yeah, 1 second.
Unless a condition is made.
However, it is important to note that the proposed improvement could visually impact the surrounding district. Historically, pools are located to the rear of properties for added privacy and security. The city's LDRs prevent pools from being located within the front yards when it is possible to locate a pool in a side or rear yard.
Okay, so in this particular case, it possibly could be located in the rear yard, which is on this particular property, it's their other side yard, and it would, and that provision in the city, I thought it said in the beginning that it was prohibited, not, what is the actual word? Is it prohibited? Unless
the actual standard for accessory structure location, 1 second. So an accessory structure may not be constructed between any principal structure and a public street or a public street right of way. So by that definition, it kind of places accessory structures in rear and rear side yards.
Okay, but a second ago, you read that the part that I was referring to that said something about, is it prohibited or discouraged?
It doesn't say prohibited, Chip. It's a location standard. That's why they're here for the variance. So
Right.
it's not allowed to be in the front yard, right? So because it can't be between the principal structure and the right of way. So if it's not allowed in the front yard, you can't put it in the front yard unless you get a variance from the LDRs allowing for it to be in the front yard.
I'm sorry, I'm not referring to that portion. I'm referring to the what was listed
Right,
as
I think that was how Jordan summarized
a
it.
prohibition, excuse me, a prohibition of putting it in the front yard unless it cannot be located in the backyard.
Right, that was the standard that he read. That was his summary of the standard. That's not the words in the code. The code is, he read the code to you, is the section part.
Shall not be placed between a principal structure and public right of way.
And public road right of way.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
that's not what I was referring to though. I was referring to the other, the portion of your presentation that said I believe it said prohibited unless it cannot be put in the backyard or something
Yeah,
like that.
those were my words, Chip. That's
Okay.
that's
All
not
right.
pulled directly from code.
I understand.
Okay, so what is the decision of the board?
I'll move to approve it.
Approve what? There are three approvals here.
Approve
Yeah.
the variances?
So you'll need to go through, this one, variances we usually do on separate motions. So the first one is the, find it here, sorry. The first potential motion is for the COA. The second potential motion is for the front setback. The third potential motion is for the accessory structure
So
location.
just read them in the order that appear here.
Sure.
Okay. I move to approve Hrpb project number 21-001-00214 with staff recommended conditions for a COA for the installation. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I reading the right thing? Oh, yes. The installation of a plus or minus 338 square foot pool in the front yard of the property located at 1001 North Lakeside Drive, based upon the competent substantial evidence in the staff report and pursuant to the City of Lake Worth Beach land development regulation and historic preservation requirements.
Can I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mr. Harris. Discussion? I have discussion. If this is to go through, I'd at least ask that requirement number or whatever, talking about 2 foot tall shrubs going in, be at least doubled to 4 foot in construction. I know it's going to cost more to buy 4 foot shrubs than 2 foot shrubs, but you really need a lot of mass. You need these shrubs to be up to 10 feet in a few years. So
I agree with you. I will do that.
I have a comment also that I believe they may possibly, I wish this were a little bit more complete with the plan, because it seems like nobody knows what size the fence is going to be required completely. And then if a 6 foot fence is required, it won't be allowed in the front yard. So therefore they're going to be back for this again. It's going to be a non-compliance thing. I would have liked to have seen it more.
I'm reasonably sure that 4 foot high fence is the requirement for around pools.
Right.
But it is 4 foot, not 6 foot.
Wow, I was sold a 6 foot. Wow.
Yeah. I'm sorry for you. Yeah, so I would ask if the person who made the motion would be willing to change condition of approval number 2 from a minimum height of 24 inches to a minimum height of 48 inches.
So it would be striking of 24 inches or 1/3 the height of the fence and replace all of that with 4 feet.
4 feet, yeah.
Yes, I move to approve that to 4 feet.
Okay, so
Why don't you add or code requirement?
or well,
Code wouldn't require it.
yeah, code wouldn't require it. I think
Just make it a condition. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. The motion has been modified. Condition has been modified.
Mr. Chairman, I know you were concerned as well about, that this landscape screening would require a permit, but for clarity, if you wanted to also add for your comfort that a landscape permit would be required with a planting plan for that screen. And that would be approved by staff.
Okay, so we will move that a landscape plan be part of the condition
So it would
and
be,
require a permit and require a permit.
it would be amending condition number 2 for application number 214 for the COA. It would be amending the height from 24 inches to 48 inches and would be requiring the planting or the landscaping to be approved with a landscape plan. A landscape permit.
Okay, you're willing to make that change?
Yes.
All right, then I guess we are ready to vote. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
I'm going to go nay also. Who's the other nay?
Chip.
Chip. Okay. So that's
Okay,
4-2.
I'm sorry, let me just call a roll on that and make sure. So Judy Fox,
Yes.
Chip Guthrie,
Nay.
Steve Pickett,
Yes.
and Ricky Martin,
yes.
Jeff Harris,
Yes.
and Bill Camp.
No.
Motion carries 2-4. 4-2, sorry.
All right, going on to the variance for the front setback.
Okay,
To make that motion.
I move to approve HRB project number 21-015-00007 with staff recommended conditions for a variance to allow 10 feet 6 inches from setback for a new pool, whereas a 20-foot front setback is required for the property located at 1001 North Lakeside Drive, based upon the competent substantial evidence in the staff report and pursuant to the City of Lake Worth Beach land development regulations and historic preservation requirements.
Can I hear a second? Second by Mr. Pickett. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. And one last motion.
I move.
I was a nay, please.
Oh, you are a nay. I'm sorry. Thank you. Motion is approved 5-1.
I move to approve HRPB project number 21-015-00008 with staff recommended conditions for a variance to allow the installation of pool in the front yard, whereas such accessory structures are not permitted between the principal structure and the street for the property located at 1001 North Lakeside Drive, based upon the competent substantial evidence in the staff report and pursuant to the City of Lake Worth Beach land development regulations and historic preservation requirements.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Harris. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion is approved 5-1. Thank you. Let's move on to the next project, which would be windows at 518 South L Street.
Hey, Mr. Vogel's gonna be having this one tonight.
Okay.
Good evening. For the record again, I'm Abraham Fogel, Preservation Planner for the City of Lake Worth Beach, and I'll be presenting this item. Item E is HRPB project number 21-001-00076, consideration of a COA for window replacement for the property located at 518 South L Street. The property owner, again, is requesting a COA to retroactively approve the existing windows that were installed without approvals. The subject property is located on the east side of South L Street between 5th Avenue South and 6th Avenue South in Lake Worth Beach. The subject property is located within the single-family residential zoning district and retains a future land use designation of single-family residential. Documentation available in the structure's property file indicates that the building was constructed circa 1925 in a Mission Revival architectural style. Although the original architectural drawings are not available, property cards from 1944 and 1956 indicate the property was originally developed with a two-family structure and rear garage. The two-family structure and garage utilized frame construction with a stucco exterior, a flat roof, and wood windows. In 1981, a major renovation was completed that included interior renovations, window replacement with awning windows, a new stucco application, and roof replacement.
You're
That
showing
same
the
year-
wrong slideshow.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Okay, so we have the property card here from the 1940s. 1981, as I mentioned, there was a major renovation. That same year, the rear garage was condemned and demolished due to structural concerns. In 2001, the 4 awning windows on the front facade were replaced with single hung windows. And in 2008, there was front door replacement. Additional improvements to the property include the installation of a solar energy system, reconstruction of a rear staircase, and new French doors on the south elevation, as well as new fencing. So this was the oldest photo we were able to find in the property file, which is not that old. It's from 2002, but this was about a year after the original windows were replaced with those awning windows. I'm sorry, the awning windows were already there from the 80s. Here we have photos of the property as it sits today. All the windows already have been replaced, and all the openings utilize single hung windows with a gray Lowy coating. So a little bit on the timeline of this project. On October 7th, a code compliance case was initiated for work without permits for the window replacement. On October 21st, we first received a building permit for the window replacement. It was disapproved as it did not include some sufficiency items such as a COA application, photos of each opening, and glass specifications. In December, we exchanged several emails with the property owner to again have more information, and we received the information. It was when the project was completed for the entire property, not just 3 windows as provided in the permit. And we indicated that administratively we could only approve window replacement within our glazing standards, which does not include tinted windows. We continued communications this year, January, March, and July, until we had a complete application that we could bring forward to the Hrpb. Initially, the item was going to come in August. That meeting was canceled, so it was scheduled for the next available hearing in September. Moving on to our historic preservation analysis, the city's historic preservation design guidelines provided a guide for compatible replacement within our historic districts. Windows are among the most important character-defining architectural features, but they are the most commonly replaced features of the building. Generally, replacement products for historic structures should match the original features in design, color, texture, and other visual qualities. Our design guidelines provide examples of successful, most successful, and unsuccessful window replacement. So administratively, staff could approve single hung windows with or without divided light patterns for the majority of the windows on the structure. However, the front facade features horizontally oriented single hung windows that are atypical for mission revival structures. If we were starting from scratch with this application, we're showing here on the slide a couple of recommendations we would have provided. One of them is to utilize pairs of single hung windows as we have on the side elevations. Another option is to utilize casement windows or horizontal sliding windows that replicate casement windows, which would bring back that verticality to these openings on the front facade. With the caveat that, as I mentioned, in the early 2000s, the front windows were replaced with single hung windows, and our requirements do allow in-kind replacement. So we're just showing an example of a most successful window replacement, but the full view single hung window would still be allowed. The issue at hand that we're really discussing tonight is the tint. Here on the right, we have the window sticker, which indicates this is a Lowy coating with a gray tint with a visual transmittance of 0.49. Just a quick recap, our design guidelines were recently amended by Resolution 31-2021 to allow a greater range of Lowy coatings. Items 5 indicates that all glazing shall be clear, non-reflective, and without tint. Low E is allowed, but the glass shall have a minimum 60% visual light transmittance measured from the center of glazing. Glass tints or any other glass treatments shall not be combined with the low E coating to further diminish the VLT of the glass. The requested gray tinted low E coating is not compliant with the current regulations for clear glass or glass with essentially a VLT of 60% or greater. Overall, full view single hung windows could be approved administratively by staff with the exception of the glass that's being proposed. In addition, our COA criteria in our historic preservation ordinance to grant a COA requires compliance with our design guidelines. Staff's responses were provided on pages 5 to 8 of the staff report. So in conclusion, window replacement was completed at the property without a building permit and historic preservation approval. The installed windows have a gray tinted low E coating with a VLT of 49% that does not comply with the city's historic preservation design guidelines. Therefore, staff recommends denial of the application and recommends that the applicant submit a revised application with new window products that can be approved administratively. That concludes staff's presentation, and the owner is present with us tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. The applicant is here. Does the applicant wish to make additional comments? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Do you have additional comments to make?
Yes, I do. First of all, thank you for considering my application. I was on this board from 2015 to 2018, I think. So I have great respect for what you do and a good understanding. I did put these windows in without a permit. That's absolutely true. I did it between two hurricanes. And frankly, when Hurricane Dorian was looming in, what was that, 2019, I realized that I couldn't protect my house. And there was a second hurricane and then a third hurricane. And I'm just going to say, honestly, that I freaked out and decided that I knew that I'd probably have a fine for not having a permit, but I needed it done now because it was better to pay a fine than it was to not be able to sleep at night, frankly. So I did that. I also have a long-term commitment to the environmental impact of the home. I already have solar panels on the roof. I too have totally replaced, you can see there's a ladder in the one photograph. All the stucco on the front and part of the side has been redone. What you can't see in this picture of the front on the left of these two is you cannot see the damage that was there from a portico that was removed. You can a little bit see there's a line along the top that runs sort of over the outside lights. Kind of make that out, maybe. But there's also a door that was pulled off, and this house has been messed about with a great deal. So I simply have tried to make it weatherproof and straighten it out as much as I can within the possible guidelines. I did not know, and I realize ignorance is no excuse, but I did not know that there was a restriction on the VTL. I did look it up for the state, and the state suggested at least as low as 0.65 in the COA. I've since learned that you have it at 60 for the lowest. So that's sort of a 5-degree difference. I don't know if that's much of a thing. I do feel that that this thing about the tint is very subjective. I did not ask for a tint. My windows do look bluish, certainly in this photograph they do. I think if it's actually, I guess it makes it gray, that's what I've been told. If you go around town and look at any of these replacement windows that have the low VTL, they look like this. I realize my analysis is subjective also, but particularly, I went around and took photographs of various homes. I don't need to bore you with that. But I am further surprised by the fact that the thing I did look up, which was the relevant state statute, provides that no ordinances or laws can prohibit the installation of solar collectors, clotheslines, or other energy devices based on renewable resources. I would consider a window that provides solar protection to be at least as good as a clothesline that doesn't require you to use a clothes dryer. So in a way, I don't see where this conversation is going. Having been on this board, I'm pretty sure you're going to turn me down, but we have to go through this, and that's all I can tell you. And probably it's too much.
Thank you very much. Let's go and have board members ask questions or make comments on the presentation by both staff and the applicant. Mr. Guthrie, do you want to start? Mr.
I'm troubled on a couple different in a couple different ways. I'm sorry, the lady didn't, I believe her last, Ms. Burnside, stated that she was a member of this board for a number of years. And for a short period of time that I've been on here, I know that we've heard tons and tons of window variances and window issues and things like that. So which all of this would have been negated had she applied for a permit. She would have gotten all the information she needed from the building department, notwithstanding hurricanes on their way and things along those lines. This is this is a 50% or 49% VLT as opposed to the 60 or 70. So my question is what everybody has been saying that brought it down from 70 to 60. What's the difference between 60 and 50? Why don't we just go ahead and let everybody tint whatever they want? So, but the inexcusable portion of this was not ignorance. The lady knows that she is required to get permits. Appears that she could have applied for and started this whole process back in 2020 when she was first cited. And so I would be inclined to decline the request for COA at this time and have her bring it into compliance.
Thank you. Other comments from board members?
Just a very quick question. What are the requirements? How do the historic requirements correspond with egress requirements in building codes? In other words, if this single hung window doesn't appear to meet any kind of an egress requirement. I know I'm not looking at.
I'm sorry. Over here, I can't hear you well. It's so muffled.
Let me try it again. What I was asking, Abraham, is how does the building code egress requirement mesh with the historic preservation requirement?
So, and that's more on the building side, but just from our experience, we try to marry the two as much as possible. So, sometimes folks prefer a casement in the bedroom to provide the greatest amount of egress. And maybe in the rest of the residence, they're doing single hung windows. So we try to, approximate the appearance. There are, from what we understand, exceptions from meeting current egress, as long as your replacement is not decreasing the egress. However, we understand that a lot of folks want, safety. They want to meet current egress. So we work with them routinely on, you want the egress, let's just get the appearance correct.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering. Is you said there is an exception as long as you don't decrease what's currently available.
You don't have to come up to current.
Okay, so all right, so that's fine. But I guess and it's kind of a moot point because the permit was applied for here regardless for the window. So probably never even got to that point. Obviously. Okay.
I have to chime in here and say I agree completely with Mr. Guthrie. The lack of a permit, the tint of the windows. Further to that, I'm guessing that these are flanged windows. In other words, they're just applied. Generally, our requirements are that there be a 2-inch or a 4-inch recess. I don't see any way that we could approve this and hew to our guidelines that we've built over the last 5-10 years. Other comments?
Yeah, I sort of echo the same thing. I realize, that there may have been some decisions made in the heat of the moment, back in the day, but there's lots of people that are running out and they're boarding up and things like that. They're not installing new windows. And the fact that it seems like from reading the background on this, that this is a code issue or an issue that's been going on for quite some time. I would almost go to the length of the fact that not only for the tinting, but just for the fact that these windows were put in and they weren't permitted. And it's been there has been a degradation of this particular building with its historic context or whatever. It might be a good idea to at least try to restore some of it with the more appropriate windows, just so that there is, there's some sort of restoration or some sort of, the look is somewhat preserved with this building. So,
other comments, other questions? Anyone?
I agree with the rest of the board.
Every week, there's one of these.
Asking forgiveness rather than permission. Does someone want to make a motion, please?
I will move to deny Hrpb project number 21001-00076 for a certificate of appropriateness or window replacement for the property located at 518 South L Street, because the applicant has not established by competent substantial evidence that the application is in compliance with the City of Lake Worth Beach land development regulations and historic preservation requirements.
Second by Ms. Fox. Moved and seconded. Hearing no additional discussion. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now I think we move on to a planning issue and an informal discussion.
Yes, so this is Pear or Rachel Lawrence and all. So this is 320 North Lakeside Drive. You all did see this as a formal item last week and requested that they come back after you all made some comments regarding the roof line for the structure. This is as it was presented with the forward facing gable roof and then the slope roof over the connecting two-story portion. So this is what you all saw last week. Next slide. And then this is the kind of revised version that came back in yesterday. Again, the building was, or the gable and the roof was reoriented, and then the pitch is not centered as discussed either. I believe that those were the only two changes made. Abe, if you can flip to the next slide, that is a comparison of the streetscape elevations. They did go ahead and enter in, as you can see on the bottom streetscape, that two-story massing. That's it does look a little bit high, but that two-story massing is kind of there, and that was left out of the first streetscape elevation. So they were just kind of adding that in. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Per Lawrenson. He is the property owner who you spoke with last week, and you all can provide any feedback that you'd like.
Can Per Lawrenson hear us?
Is he with us?
Hear me?
We're on the screen.
Yes.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. Modern technology, not a good fit. So I want to thank the board very much for the good ideas last week, which we attempted to apply, and I think the results. So we were very happy with what effect turning the gable had on the facade. I think we have succeeded in lowering the height of the facade itself by more or less by 10 feet, while actually lowering the peak of the roof and essentially maintaining the maximum height of the stairway connector, the stairway portion of the connector. We reduced the space in the floor between the ceiling of the first floor and the floor of the second floor, and brought the eave down on the street side with the asymmetrical gable, and it made I think a significant difference.
Okay. Board members' comments.
Can you go back to the other picture? I saw a house I didn't see before. Or else it's getting late. Here, right down on the bottom, right above where it says 380 Lakeside. See, there's a in the back, there's a house there. On the top picture, there's not a house there. Am I seeing something stupid?
You are seeing what actually is there. It had been left off of the streetscape previously. It was and then realized that it actually should be there, and it does help to
Well, it levels it out.
I'm sorry.
It levels it out.
Yeah, it does. It does, and it it is it should have been in the streetscape from the get-go.
It exists.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's part of our house. It's the back part of the house on the eastern side.
Okay.
Can I ask something?
Sure.
The difference between the top image and the bottom image, with the area that we're really concerned about is the connector between the single-story structure and the new two-story structure. Are those two options that are different than what we had before? Because it seems to me like there was a much lower connector from the single-story structure into the second story in what we viewed before. So both of these have raised that stairway area, but if anybody's asking my preference, I would say the one on the top is preferable to the one on the bottom, but I don't know if that's where everybody was going with this.
I would be I see what you're saying. It appears as though the connector is higher now than it was previously with the roof slope the other direction.
In both of those, yeah.
Yeah, I mean the eave height is higher than the eave height of the main bedroom area. Mr. Harris, what sort of thoughts do you have?
Right, I'm wondering about that too. Can you flip to that section? Yeah, there we go.
I will say I do think that the lowered roof line in the front is a big improvement. I think that works very well.
Did your designer, he didn't cut a section through the stairway at all, did he? In other words, there's no real way. I guess what I'm getting at is I still believe that is similar to the way you have an off-center roof on the main portion of the addition. I think you could do that with the stairs as well. I mean, there seems to be a lot of headroom that's perhaps unnecessary at the top of the stair. I know it's tight, and I know in the plan that we saw last week, it showed the stair actually winding. I just lost my computer, but it showed the stair actually winding in two locations, I think. But I'm just wondering if we couldn't still lower or adjust that roof line somehow to be a little bit lower than it is right now, at least on the street side. So it would be more in keeping with what you've got going on with the upper level. You could perhaps do an asymmetrical ridge in there too.
That's just for the connector.
Yeah, right,
we're
exactly.
not talking about the one with the garage, but the
Right.
And will you flip to the previous? So this is what was here last month or last week.
Right.
Are you talking about combining the connector from this one with the garage portion of the other?
Yeah,
or?
not necessarily. I mean, the nice thing about the last one, the previous version of it, was that the connector was lower on the north side, and at least it made that transition. But then you get to the gable, and it's so tall. Although now I have to say, now that you've added in the second story, maybe it's not that much taller. It's still sort of a big blank space to me, but I'm thinking that I'm just wondering if there's not a way that we could use that same trick of the stair type.
Are they serious about wanting that terrace on the second floor? Is that a requirement? Because without the terrace, the roof line could just drop down directly overhead the staircase.
Yeah, pretty dramatic.
Are you suggesting that actually that roof slope to the north is going back basically to what was in the previous iteration? Is that what you're suggesting?
That would be my thought. I don't know if other people feel the same.
But just for the connector.
Just for the connector. So I think we all like the roof on the main addition. It's the connector.
So combine the connector from last week with the garage structure from this week?
Yes.
Yeah, in other words, a shed roof bangs up into the side of the house.
I was wondering if that was possible. Is it possible or not? Is it?
Are you understanding that, Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence?
Oh, I am. Yeah, I think it's doable. I suppose it would mean the loss of the terrace, but and that was going to be that was going to be my hot tub, but that's all right.
Well, but if you look at some of the Mission and Mediterranean style houses in West Palm Beach, and certainly down here as well, you can see that lots of them they kind of build in a spiral. If you follow what I'm saying, they start low and they wrap around a sort of an assumed core, and they end in a tower. It's much less. They're actually much less symmetrical than you might think, and they have And because of that, they have really interesting massings. And so I'm thinking that what Bill was saying is, if you, maybe it's not a covered terrace. I mean, maybe it's just a flat roof terrace up there, if you want to put a hot tub in. And the stair tower comes down behind that and creates kind of a wall for privacy from the street.
Do you mean a flat roof terrace or an open terrace without a roof?
I'm sorry, well, I meant an open terrace, so yeah, just without a top. But that's where I was thinking about the way that those larger Mediterranean style houses kind of wrap around themselves.
Mm-hmm. Or even if you really want a terrace, there's no reason you couldn't cantilever a terrace off of the bedroom itself. It would certainly give a nice.
That's true. Give a some definition.
Some definition to that back elevation.
Terrace is on the back, and with the sloping roof that you saw last week, the terrace still worked. So it's not really that's an issue. The issue was last week, and I had misunderstood that what you were talking about last week when I talked about how expensive it would be to have two different roof lines. And then I understood after the meeting that you hadn't meant two different roof lines. You really just meant taking the entire roof and changing what went east-west and make it go north-south. So we did that. I do think it makes the front on the new version look more like a big block. So we're back to two different roof lines, because the reason that we had that sloping roof, it was actually Jordan's suggestion initially to try to bring that down, because obviously the top of the stairs is closest to the garage structure. So we don't actually need all that height. It just gets into a complicated roof line to chop it off. It's not, you can still have a terrace on the back. It doesn't impact the terrace as much as it just is just a different roof line.
Yeah, I don't think, I mean, it's not going to add any expense if you continue with the version 1 roof line over the stairway, and you lower the apparent height from the street with the version number 2 roof.
Do you think that if you, going back to the other picture of the new version, do you think that if that roof over the connector had a larger overhang so that it came down more, that it might help break it up? Because it looks like sort of a minimal roof compared to the other. Maybe if there was an actual
it's a narrower
overhang.
section to that part, yeah.
Well, maybe a bigger overhang might take away some of the massing.
Or actually make that an asymmetrical gable as well, and or make it an asymmetrical gable to lower it on the west side, lower the eave on the west side. I think that is doable over the stairs, as suggested.
Well, look, there's some alternatives to that. Again, I mean, if you look at some of the other earlier Mission and Mediterranean style houses, if you can break up the mass of that wall, I think that would help it a lot. That giant stair wall. For example, if you put a band of clear story windows at the top of that, just to separate the roof from the huge mass of stucco, that might help it a lot. There are any number of things that you could look at if you're between you and your designer. You could look at ways, just sketch things out quickly and take a look at them. I mean, it seems like it's just, I don't know. I mean, I'm not trying to create problems. I'm just trying to make this look a little nicer. The transition right now between the old house and the addition is obviously very abrupt, the way it's drawn right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I take your point. I think that those are a couple of interesting ideas, and some sort of additional fenestration or something on the west facade would help, and also making that eave lower and perhaps the the roof appear more, well, make it appear that there's more depth to that part of the two-story structure.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't think you should necessarily give up on Bill's idea of of letting that roof slope down either. I mean, that's why I'm saying this is something that you should be doing with your designer, with just sketches between the three of you, just quickly looking at possibilities.
Okay.
I really would like to see that connector slope in the opposite direction to actually.
What you guys are talking is here, no?
That's right.
Like this.
That's right.
Coming down.
Yeah, the way it was on the original one, but now that it's set, it's set back nicely, there's nice articulation there. I think that would really help it. I mean, again, I in my mind's eye, I see all these other examples of the way these houses were built and how really unbelievably interesting and whimsical a lot of them are, even the gigantic ones. So
yeah, I take your point, and I know what you're talking about in terms of let's call it a stairway tower, which often appear to be circular winding stairs up. This, of course, this structure doesn't have this particular. The existing structure doesn't have any flat roof elements to it, but having said that, it is part of the vernacular, and it might be an interesting way of sort of making it a more interesting facade, as long as you don't think it turns into something of a dog's breakfast by having, the gable roof together with flat roof.
no, well, it's not really a flat roof. It wouldn't be that way at all.
Question for you, because the original, when we first talked to the architect, we talked, or at least I talked about making that connector part look like a tower, which not at all like a house, but sort of like a tower, which you see in some of these older houses. And somehow that just got ditched as an impractical thing, but maybe it would make it more interesting. Well, I mean, what do you think about that? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's certainly a possibility, but I think it's, again, the towers on those houses, they really went somewhere. Eventually you got up into a little room at the very top of the building.
Yeah.
And
I think it works in some instances, but not here.
yeah, not necessarily.
No, I don't think so.
But I will say that adding the back second story to the overall elevation makes a significant difference in the way we can read the house now.
Yeah, no, it should have been there from the beginning, but I think that was an oversight, and it is it is very definitely there. That's the only, that is the only part of the house that's above base flood elevation. So that's part of why this is on the drawing board. How are you feeling about the modified two-story portion of, with the?
I think it worked well. I think it worked very well.
You're talking about
the off-center gable and the lowered section in the front. I think that's exactly what it should be doing.
Jordan, who was the architect on this building originally?
It's undefined, not labeled.
Alice.
Louis Canales.
No. I'm talking about the original architect.
Yeah.
Oh.
We don't have records from usually the 20s to the very early 30s.
Okay, yeah. I had heard that it was I'd heard it was somebody who was doing a lot of work on Palm Beach.
Considering how the house is, it probably is.
Yeah.
German.
Yeah, like that.
All right, is that concluded?
I just, as far as the window treatment or whatever, and looking at the rest of the house, it just seems a little bit like both the two-story area and the connector, they look a little bit to me more like a secondary facade. The windows are small. There's a lot of blank space or whatever. When you look at the existing house And even the back facade of the two-story, there's a lot more window there. It kind of fills the facade a lot more and gives a lot more character to it. So I don't know. To me, there's still a lot of blank facade there that could add a little bit more. You could add a little bit more character to it.
At the connector.
At the connector, well, even those the shutters, the faux windows that are on the second story or whatever, they seem.
Could use some more detail. Could use,
considering how big the facade is and everything. And then when you show the other picture of the full elevation of the whole house, the existing elevation of the house, the windows are a lot more prominent. They add a lot more character to the facade. There's a small little one story and the windows are right there. And then you've got this big two story with these small little windows in it. So,
Right.
Jordan was just chatting with me, showing me something, and one of the things that both of us thought of with your idea with the shed roof and the windows is, in the Mediterranean homes, they used to have the same window that the small narrow window that they have, but they used to do it in a
Trek up
Right, that's
to
right.
track up
Up the stairwell.
yeah.
Have the shed roof,
Mhm.
windows.
that would be
tracking
wonderful. That'd be great.
It would add a lot of light.
Shed roof with 3 or 4 or 2 or 3 or 4 small windows following the ascent of the staircase would be wonderful.
I think what Steve was saying is a good idea too. These little shutters, you didn't change the plan, right? You're gonna keep the closet out here. You're gonna keep the closet out over above the garage doors, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so I think what Steve was saying is if you could at least scale these things up, that would help a lot.
The shutter, the
Yeah,
fake windows, the shutters.
The fake windows, the shuttered windows,
They
yeah.
could easily be 25% bigger or maybe just add another one. Or
Well,
maybe,
they were supposed to be dropped down a little bit and.
I think they're nice. I think they're nice, tight to the eave. I think that's the way you want them.
You do right up against the
Yeah,
roof?
because that makes,
Brings the site down.
exactly, that makes the house, it lowers the apparent height of the roof by having those things hard up against it.
Yeah,
Okay.
but increasing their size is certainly doable. I don't know how they compare to the size of those prairie style casement windows in the existing
It looks smaller.
front.
They just match the height of that. It might.
Those are, I believe, those are 3 by 4. I think.
Well, they're
those,
pretty big because those used to be garage doors.
Yeah, but I think those are.
Right.
I think those are 3 by 4. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're only 2 by 3. Yeah, no, I mean those shuttered windows can be increased in size. Certainly, I think you're right. And
Okay, let's wrap this up.
the idea of the three vertically oriented windows following the stairwell, following the rise of the stairs, I think is an interesting idea as well.
That'd be great, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll see you, I guess, in a month and a half or so.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you for your input. Appreciate it.
Let's get to department reports, folks.
Abraham?
All right, this one is very quick. It's about our Old Town Historic District. So just a quick mention recognizing the 20th anniversary of our Old Town Historic District being listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Here we have a postcard and a historic photo of Lake Avenue. So our Old Town Local Historic District was created through Ordinance 99-17 on May 18th, 1999. Here we have a map showing the boundaries of our local historic district. Subsequently to the local designation, the downtown was nominated by the city for the National Register of Historic Places. The National Register of Historic Places is the United States federal government's official list of district sites, buildings, structures, and objects deemed worthy of preservation for their historic significance. The passage of the National Historic Preservation Act in 1966 established the National Register and the process for adding properties to it. Here we have the map of our National Register for the Old Town Historic District. It's slightly smaller than our local designation. That listing was published on September 22, 2001, which is a week away from today, would mark the 20th anniversary. So I encourage anyone who wants additional information, you can go to the National Register of Historic Places website. You're able to do a search by county, by state and county, and you can find our listing. There's the full designation report as well as a good archive of photos when that was conducted in the early 2000s. That's all.
Excellent. I think I'm going to do that. Other department reports?
Yes, we have one very sad one. Jordan is abandoning us. I mean, Jordan has been offered a very awesome position with the town of Palm Beach. He's going to be now more planner than historic preservationist. He's, you know, flying on his wings away up to more career opportunities.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
It's been 5 years. So it's but I have to say, like, this board today is in the strongest position I've ever seen it in. You all make logical, ordinance-based decisions, and I'm very happy to leave you where you're at.
We are really going to miss you.
Oh.
Big time.
He's trying to kill me.
You guys, I've told Eric, Aaron in the past or whatever, and I hopefully have, you know, communicated it to you, all of you, that I really appreciate your staff reports. Your staff reports are clear, they're complete. I understand what the issue is. I can make a decision. I have all the information I need, so I really appreciate that. You guys have done an amazing job.
And we wish you all the best of luck in your fantastic new project and your new job.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Don't be strangers. I'll send out, before I leave, I'll send you all my, you know, personal information. Stay in touch. I love to have a drink every now and then. So.
That's good. Yeah, I'm going to miss not having you and Abraham on the phone talking me off a ledge.
Well, Abe is still here, and we have advertised the position, so you know the great planner with historic preservation background or a historic preservation expert with any background who might be a good fit for our team. You know, please have them put their hat in, and it's going to be difficult to replace. But
yes.
We're very glad that we still have Abraham, who's also a star in his own right.
Yep.
So
Abraham, you're going to step up, and we're going to rely on you big time too. All right. Anything else on that sad note?
Yeah.
Let's adjourn.
Adjourn.